It's my immense pleasure to invite you all on behalf of Department of Biochemistry, Jipmer, Puducherry, under the aegis of Association of Medical Biochemists of India, to this online CME on Labmedics. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Sharbari Basu, Professor, Head, Department of Biochemistry, Jipmer, Puducherry, to deliver the welcome address.
A very good morning to one and all. I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to the esteemed speakers and delegates of today's CME, Labmedics, Understanding Modern Concepts. I wish to think that the topics chosen here will help us to understand and implement modern concepts better in our respective labs. I hope you find the sessions useful, and I wish you all a happy morning engaged in fruitful learning. Once again, a hearty welcome to all of you from the Department of Biochemistry, Jipmer, Pondicherry, under the aegis of AMBI. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your hearty welcome. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Rohit to introduce our first speaker of the day.
Good morning to all. Let us begin our first session of the day. I would like to invite Dr. Vinodini, Professor and Head, Department of Biochemistry at SRM Medical College Research Center, Chennai. Ma'am has completed MBBS and MD Biochemistry from Madras Medical College. She has an academic experience of 20 years. Her interests include research work in lipidology, quality control, and practicing newer teaching methodologies to instill an interest in clinical biochemistry among undergraduate students. She has published several research papers in indexed national and international journals and has guided ICMR STS projects. She is the principal investigator with HCl Technologies for harmonization of biochemical analytes across analyses. Over to you,
ma'am. Good morning to everyone. And at the outset, I wish to thank the Department of Biochemistry of Jipmer, Professor Ramesh sir, and its HO giving me this wonderful opportunity. And thank you, Dr. Rohit, for this introduction. And I thank Dr. Monisha for coordinating all the events. A very good morning to everyone. So this topic for discussion is establishing pediatric reference intervals. And I represent the Department of Biochemistry at SRM Medical College, Tamil Nadu. So these are the contents. Introduction to reference interval. What is the need for establishing pediatric reference intervals and the challenges involved? The current status of pediatric reference intervals. A brief note on the caliper study. What are the processes in the establishment of pediatric reference intervals? And what is the application and the benefit of transference of pediatric reference intervals? And our current stand and the implications of continuous reference intervals. So we should realize that the children are not small adults. Introduction. The reference intervals are important tools which aid clinicians to differentiate between healthy and diseased population. In children, they should not only be derived from healthy subjects, but also reflect the different phases of physiological development from birth to adolescence. According to the current guidelines of the Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute, RAs are defined as the interval between two limiting values. Within those values, 95% of the values for apparently healthy individuals would fall, which is usually between the 2.5th and the 97.5th percentiles of the distribution of test results of a reference population, which means an apparently healthy population. In other words, reference interval refers to the central 95% of values obtained from the healthy population. In practice, different kinds of reference intervals are usually being used by pediatricians. They can include those reported in reference pediatric textbooks or RIs established using an adult reference population, which is quite commonly used in most of our laboratories. RIs provided by manufacturers of clinical laboratory analysis systems, which again is commonly practiced. Or sometimes the RIs can be developed by the individual laboratories themselves or based on peer publications. So what is the need for establishing pediatric reference intervals and what are the challenges involved? We all know that the dynamic nature of different analytes as children grow and develop influences the representation of reference intervals, which are usually partitioned for different age ranges. But this approach can lead to a misdiagnosis, especially when the age of the child being investigated is in close proximity to the borders of the partition. For example, when there are reference groups of 1 to 3 and 3 to 7, and the child being investigated is in the age of 3, we will not know whether to fit it in 1 to 3 or 3 to 7. And the range normal for 1 to 3 can be abnormal for 3 to 7 or vice versa. This misdiagnosis can cause a repeat of tests, increased utilization of health services, and of course, anxiety to the parents. So we need to remember that reference ranges also need to include gender as well as ethnic variations. Going on to the challenges. Collecting blood samples from children for different laboratory analytes is challenging due to the following factors. Difficulties in subject recruitment, obviously. And it is difficult to collect ample blood and urine samples from healthy pediatric individuals, especially the neonates and infants. The requirement of specialist phlebotomy procedures and trained staff to take samples from neonates and infants, and of course, the huge ethical concern of obtaining blood from healthy children. The current status of pediatric RIs. Considering the challenges in establishing pediatric RIs, this process is practically limited to large-scale pediatric specialist centers with dedicated research resources or multinational diagnostic manufacturers. Laboratories analyzing small number of pediatric specimens may be able to adopt only previously published pediatric RIs. Hence, validation and verification of RIs in pediatric population will play important role in ensuring that appropriate RIs are in use in local laboratory sites. What are the population-based prospective pediatric studies conducted so far? Several countries have taken initiatives to establish pediatric RIs. CALIPER, Canadian Laboratory Initiative on Pediatric Reference Intervals, the German Health Interview and Examination Survey for Children and Adolescents, Children's Health Improvement through Laboratory Diagnostics, Scandinavian Institute for Establishment of Pediatric Reference Intervals. In Australia, the LOOK study, Lifestyle of Our Kids, the Australian HAPPY study, Harmonizing Age Pathology Parameters in Kids, and the PRINCE study, Pediatric Reference Intervals in China, to name some of them. The CALIPER study, the Canadian Laboratory Initiative on Pediatric Reference Intervals, is one of the largest pediatric RI projects and has contributed significantly to improving the clinical diagnosis and interpretation of pediatric test results. CALIPER has collected thousands of samples from healthy children in Canada across several ethnic groups and has established pediatric RIs on Abbott Architect Analyzer. HAPPY study. Australian Harmonizing Age Pathology Parameters in Kids has also reported continuous age and sex-specific RIs for common biochemistry analytes across 5 commercially available analyzers. The HAPPY Kids study was the first to directly compare test results across analyzers and provide scientific evidence in support of harmonizing RIs for a majority of biochemistry analytes. PRINCE study. Addressing the lack of accurate pediatric RIs in China, The Pediatric Reference Intervals in China project aims to establish and verify pediatric arrays for 31 analytes using data collected from approximately 15,000 healthy children from 10 children's hospitals. The process of establishment of pediatric arrays. It is more or less similar to the process for adults with a few differences. So I'll be highlighting the differences. So broadly, there are two phases. The first one will be establishment of the reference interval. And the second, of course, will be a validation of the reference interval thus obtained. Establishment of the reference interval. So I have mentioned approval of the ethical committee first, because these are certain things which are overlooked. And especially there are huge concerns because this is a pediatric, a vulnerable age group. Informed consent to be obtained from each participant's legally authorized representative, parent or the guardian, in the case of children less than 8 years. Otherwise, the informed consent will have to be obtained from both the child and the legally authorized representative, which is called as an assent if the child is less than 18 years of age. Only apparently healthy children to be included as potential reference individuals according to the patients are confirmed as healthy after a questionnaire screening and subsequent physical examination by the neonatologist or the pediatrician. Considering the heterogeneity in different age groups, different selection criteria have to be established for the different age groups. In this manner, a pediatric array will be different from that of adults. According to the CLSI guidelines, 120 is the minimum sample size to determine the 2.5th and the 97.5th percentiles if using the direct sampling, which is the required sample size if using the non-parametric method to calculate reference intervals. Thus, at least 120 reference observations should be obtained for the different subclasses. If you're going by gender, then we need to have 120 in each. And when we are partitioning the age group, for each partition, we need to have 120. So when we're doing a pediatric reference interval, the number of samples required is going to be huge when compared to an adult, because we're going to partition for neonates and for each age group. Reference individuals will be required to fast overnight for at least 8 hours. However, for neonates and infants, the collection of specimens will be conducted before their next feeding, and the fasting interval cannot be strictly adhered to. Of course, all the procedures to collect, handle, store, and analyze specimens will be in accordance with the standard operating protocols. So that's about the collection of the data. Then analysis of the data. It will include inspection of the distribution to see whether there's a Gaussian distribution or not. Identifying and handling of erroneous results. They could be outliers. We have documented methods to identify outliers. And once the outliers are identified, there is no need to remove unless it is absolutely required. One has to look into the outliers and find out and analyze what could be the cause, and then only take appropriate measures. And moving on to the methods for determining reference limits, or based on that, of course, the reference interval. The methods widely used are the non-parametric method and the parametric method. And of course, there are other methods for calculating the reference limits. The robust method, the bootstrap method. And the parametric, the robust and the bootstrap method are generally used when we have a lesser number of samples which are available. And then the guidelines would be a different set. And when enough parameters or samples are available, and when we are able to go for 120, the non-parametric method is used. And that is the one recommended by the IFCC and the CLSI. Explaining only about the non-parametric methods to estimate the reference limits and thereby the reference interval. It is simple to perform. It does not require the distribution to be Gaussian. It's recommended by FCC as well as CLSI. The 2.5th and the 97.5th percentiles are taken as the lower and the upper reference limits respectively And the 90% confidence interval of the reference limits have to be determined. Okay, now we shall see how to go about this calculation of the reference limits with their 90% confidence interval by using the non method. So we have taken 120 samples from 120 reference individuals, which is the minimum required. And we have identified them as reference individuals based on a questionnaire followed by clinical examination. And since we are using the non-parametric method, which is advised or recommended by IPC and CLSI, we are using the number 120. Of course, it can be more than that, but the minimum is 120. So let's assume that we have 120 values with us. And these values are called reference values, which are obtained from the reference individuals. So the reference values are first arranged in ascending order, and the individual values are ranked. This will help us to understand. So this table shows an example using 123 serum gamma GT values. We have the values arranged in ascending order. And this is the frequency. The value of 6 is repeated only once, whereas the value of 7 is repeated twice. The value of 8 is repeated 6 times. So based on this, a rank order is assigned. So this is the least value. So the rank order 1 has been given. The next value is 7, repeated twice. So the rank is second and third. The next value subsequent is 8, repeated 6 times. So the rank value is given to 9. And this is how it proceeds. And the highest value was found to be 50, repeated only once. And the rank order has to be 123. If the sample is 120, the last one, the rank would be 120. So we have taken 120 values, we have arranged them in ascending order, and we have also given them a rank. So now we shall see how to calculate the percentiles. So we need to calculate the lower and the upper one, that is the 2.5th percentile and the 97.5th percentile. So this will be the formula common to all of them. 0.025 into n plus 1, 0.975 into n plus 1. N here means the number that we have taken. So the 2.5th percentile for 123 will be the third ranking one, and 97.5th percentile for a number of 123 will be 120.9, which is the 121st rank. So going back to this, we can see what was in the third rank and what was in the 121st rank. So the third rank is 7, and the 21st rank is 40. We go back and find out what value it was. So the 2 percentile is 7 and the 97.5th percentile is 47. So these are the 2.5th and 97.5th percentile values, which are otherwise called as the lower reference limit and the upper reference limit, within which the reference interval will fall. Then we'll also have to find out the 90% confidence limit for the reference limits. So the calculation using the particular techniques for the lower reference limit is 6 to 8, and for the upper reference limit is 39 to 50. So we understand that when we say this is the 6 to 8 is a 90% confidence limit, what we need is the certainty with which we can say that the particular value of 7 falling between the range of 6 to 8 is 90%. And when we say a value of 47 falling between 39 and 50 as the confidence limit, we mean the certainty with which we can say that the value of 47 falls between these two ranges has got a certainty of 90%, and of course with a 10% error. And that is what is meant by 90% confidence limits. So we have got the lower reference limit as 7 and the upper as 47 with a confidence limit of 6 to 8 and 39 to 50 respectively. So now we have learned how to arrive at a calculation of a reference interval. Once we have done that, we need to do a validation to see whether what we have calculated applies to our otherwise the other group of people to whom we are going to apply it. So this will be called as a validation when they are establishing the reference interval. So in accordance with the CLSI EP 28A3C guidelines, the established RIs, which we have calculated thus, will have to be validated using samples again from at least 120 reference individuals. Of course, there are certain other guidelines which give lesser values, say 40, but this is the one widely accepted, so we go for 120 reference individuals. So for establishing, we took 120 reference individuals, and because it is pediatric, for each group, for each partitioning of each age group, we'll have to take 120. And once we are done with that, we need to do a validation. Again, we need to take 120 different set of individuals, and we check or we validate. And the established RA, which we have already got, will be accepted if not more than 10% of the results of this 120 are outside the RA. That means we've already established RA, we have got a value of 7 to 47. Then we take another set of 120 reference individuals, healthy individuals, and we estimate the value of gamma GT. And when we say 10%, that means 12. Okay, only 12 of this 120 can have their values beyond what we have estimated as 7 to 47. Only then it is validated. So what happens when we have more than 10% of results? So in that case, what we'll have to do is we'll have to leave off this 120 and go in for another set of new 120 reference individuals, because the understanding is maybe the 120 we took were not exactly healthy individuals. So we need to take discard this and go in for a new set of 120 reference individuals. And still, if the results are coming as more than 10% are falling outside the reference interval which we have calculated, then we cannot accept the one which we have calculated. We need to scrutinize the procedure, analyze, find out whether there were any things which went wrong. We'll have to review the whole process, and if it still doesn't work out, then the entire process of establishment of RA will have to be reworked again. And so because of all these difficulties, we started seeing whether there are other options available, not very exhaustive, and at the same time, those which reflect the actual situation. So we have something called as a data mining of pediatric reference intervals. So we understood that creation of reference intervals using conventional approaches involves ethical concerns and large number of samples to be selected and tested, thus causing practical difficulties. So data mining uses available laboratory test results and clinical information available from the hospital information system to create RA. So this is called as the indirect method or the posteriori method. The advantage is that extensive number of available results and the use of advanced statistical methods enable us to create the pediatric reference intervals. But the disadvantage is that we may not know whether these these children who are admitted are actually healthy, or were they having any disease states, because they were admitted for the hospital. It could be for a routine screening, or which is very unlikely in a newborn or in a pediatric age group. Maybe children who are admitted for procedures like circumcision, or those situations where they're otherwise apparently healthy. So there is one more way of capturing reference intervals apart from data mining, and that is called as transference of reference interval. So we understood that establishing new reference intervals is a complex, costly, and a daunting task involving recruitment and sample collection from a large number of healthy individuals. Hence, the CLSI has issued guidelines on transferring the reference intervals established in one laboratory, that is the donor laboratory, to other laboratories, the receiving laboratories. So this caliper study was one of the first to do extensive work on establishing pediatric reference interval, but this was done in Abbott Architect. So they helped to transfer the established pediatric RIs to other analytical platforms, namely Beckman Coulter, Siemens, Roche, and Witros. So transference of reference intervals can only occur if there is a good correlation between the methods used in the donor and receiving laboratories, and the results produced by both the methods are normally distributed. So when it's like an initial comparison that we do between the two instruments based on CLSI guidelines. And what we usually follow for method comparison will have to be followed: calculation of the linear regression, Bland-Altman plots. And if these criteria are met, then a mathematical equation, suppose there is a good correlation between the two with an R value of more than 0.95, then we can go in for a mathematical equation that governs the relationship between the results produced by both the platforms, because the correlation could be good, but there could be a proportional bias. So this equation will take care of the proportional bias. This equation is used to convert the original reference intervals into transferred reference intervals that can be applied to the platform in the receiving laboratory. And even though the transference has to be done, the receiving laboratory must verify. As we know, what is done at the laboratory during development is validation, and what we do at our end is verification. So though a transference has been done, the receiving laboratory must verify the transferred reference intervals using specimens from a small number, minimum 20, that is the CLSI guidelines, of reference individuals recruited from healthy population. But I understood that Beckman-Coulter, they went beyond 20. They analyzed 100 or slightly more for verification using the caliper samples also. So this is about verification of a reference interval. This is similar to what we do in our laboratory when we want to verify the reference interval given to us by the manufacturer. So first we need to select the reference individuals, minimum of 20, representative of the laboratory's healthy population. The advantage here is we have our own population to check the transferred values. So if no more than 2 of the 20 tested subjects values fall outside the original limits, that means we are taking 10%. So for 120, 10% was 12, and here it is 20, so 10% is 2. So if 18 values of what we have estimated falls within the reference interval which is available for us from the manufacturer's side or the transferred values, then we can say that the reference limits are considered as valid, and we can use that. Whereas if 3 or 4, see, it's only 3 or 4, not more, 3 or 4 test results fall outside, then maybe this 20 was not an exactly a representative healthy population. Then we should consider taking another set of 20 reference specimens. Whereas if we have 5 or more, then this reference interval is not verified. It is not acceptable to our population. We cannot accept it. And coming back to what happens, so if it is less than, if it is 2, we accept it. 3 or 4, we have a process. 5, we do not accept it at all. So if it is 3 or 4, we need to go in for another 20. And with that 20, we again repeat this process. If it is less than 10%, we can accept it. But if it falls, if it is more than 10%, then we'll have to revise, find out, we can check whether we have made any errors, or we can also consider a biological difference between the population tested by us and the population which was used for testing or deriving the original reference interval. Or if all these are fine, then we cannot accept it. We'll have to develop our own RIs according to the original method. And about continuous reference intervals. Continuous reference intervals reflect the true dynamic relationship between age and laboratory values, and will thus lead to more accurate laboratory test result interpretation. To better reflect the actual influence of age on pediatric laboratory values, Caliper has developed continuous reference intervals based on non-parametric regression method. The implementation of continuous reference intervals into current laboratory information system poses an obstacle, as laboratories have limited capacity to accommodate mathematical functions for laboratory test interpretation based on continuous reference curves specific for age and gender. Therefore, reducing the complexity of continuous reference intervals into narrow age groups is likely still required. Well, that's what we can still do for implementation into clinical laboratories. But we can still use third-party web-based platforms as for laboratory professionals and physicians to input the patient's information and laboratory test result and obtain interpretation based on continuous reference intervals. We can still do it, but incorporating it into could be difficult. So this is about the continuous reference intervals where we have the age in years and the concentration. So this is something similar to the chart that is used in the pediatric age group, where based on the height and the weight of the child, we can compare the child's values with the percentiles for a normal reference population. Here we have the blue one and the pink one representing the values for boys and girls respectively, with the 2.5 and the 2.5 and the 97.5th percentile. And the values will fall between the two lines, and that will help us to understand. So summarizing the presentation, the central 95% of values obtained from the healthy population between the 2.5th and the 97.5th percentile is the reference interval. Collecting blood samples from children for different laboratory analytes is challenging. Several countries have taken initiatives to establish pediatric RI, caliper being the most important. The process of establishment of pediatric RIs consists of two phases, namely establishment of the reference interval and its validation. At least 120 reference observations should be obtained for the different subclasses. Data mining as well as transference of RI can be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We will move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker, Dr. G. Jayachandran, Professor and HOD of Biochemistry, PSG, Institute of Medical Education and Research. He is the pioneer of instrumentation workshop. He did his MBBS from Preliminary Medical College. After 6 years of general practice, he graduated MD Biochemistry from Madras Medical College. He has 20 years of experience in clinical biochemistry laboratory. His current area of research is untargeted metabolomics. He is an NABL MLAP assessor and NABL technical assessor. He is currently the representative of AMBI Tamil Nadu. Now I kindly invite sir to start the session. Welcome, sir.
So good morning, everyone. At the outset, I want to thank the Jipmer Biochemistry team for giving me an opportunity to share my experience or whatever I have learned in instrument selection with all of you. Maybe I think you can, this will be a little more informal session. You can ask question on the go itself in the chat box. I am keeping my chat box open so I can say respond to your whatever queries you have got. Okay, right. So, right, let us start with this. Okay, Labmedics. So, my objectives at the end of the session will be the participant will be ready to appraise and select, if given an opportunity, an instrument and reagent, instrument and reagent system. Okay, so what do you think about this thing? Just reply in the chat box. Are you all there? What do you see from this picture? What is your reflection? So, Alex, you like buying? Are you addicted to buying? Okay, so if instrument selection and buying also easy for you. Right. Tell me, okay, we'll see. We should have a ISO 15189 says that you should have a documented procedure for selection and purchasing external services, equipment, reagent, and consumable. You should have a documented procedure. Okay. I think is that we'll start with when you want to have an instrument. Okay. what makes you to have an instrument? Okay, what's the indication? Okay, when you want to buy an instrument, or what makes you to go for a new reagent? What is the trigger for the purchase as a whole? Can you answer in the chat box? Anyone? Low cost. So, if at all, why you want to buy an equipment? Okay, at what point you will decide that I want a new equipment? I want to buy a new test or something like that. Okay, what makes you to go for a new things? Increased load, workload, high demand, upgradation, patient need. Okay, so what's the indication? Actually, if there is a upgradation or a planned expansion or something like that, okay, so you want to buy an equipment. So otherwise, when there is an underperforming test, you have to keep it in mind that the next opportunity you have to say change this method or equipment. So whenever you are troubleshooting with your IQC, okay, you will be forced to use a little more wider ST. Okay, some parameter will force you to use a wider ST, and at the end of the month you will be reviewing your IQC, and your ST will be CV percentage will be high. Okay, and in that case you have to keep it in mind that this parameter is not doing well. Okay, if I get an opportunity, I will change this. Okay, other thing is a user need. But suppose a gastroenterologist come and tell you, I want a fecal okay, elastase getting done, get it done, okay, or something like that. Then you need a method. Okay, so this is how the trigger for a new method or equipment will come. Okay, and once you get the say this trigger, also don't jump into the conclusion for buying an equipment. First to see the economical viability and all, whether you should buy this equipment and do the test yourself, or you can just leave it for a okay, say referral lab or something like that. Okay, so whether to make it or whether you are going to make it yourself, or say whether you're going to refer it, that decision you have to take. Okay, and roughly if you are getting somewhere around 10 tests per month, you can always do it in your lab. Okay, anything more than 10, anything in 2 digits, you will definitely pick up. Okay, you have to just think about all these things, and then you have to go for the instrument purchase. Okay, so when you are first you have to make sure that what you want. Okay, what throughput you want, what technology you want, what design qualification you want. Okay, so if a lab is having some 400 tests per month, okay, 400 tests per day. Okay, or let us say a lab is having maybe 1,000 tests per day, we'll say round 1,000 tests per day. Okay, and what throughput will aim at? If a lab is having a 1,000 tests per day, say 1,000 biochemistry tests per day, what throughput you will be aiming at? Roughly make a calculation and tell me what throughput you want to have. Yeah, good response. 200 per hour. 250. So if you are having 250, you can finish your workload in 4 hours. Why you want that 250? I think is that always better to go for something like this. Maybe in my lab, when I did the calculation, I am having more than 20 times the what is our requirement. Okay, whatever almost whatever say samples are there, I can complete in 1 hour, something like that. Okay, 1 hour, 2 hours, like that. I am having that. Okay, so lab, though it is a say we are having 1,000 samples per day, the samples have got some pattern. They will all come in the morning, and think of at least 10 times the whatever the throughput is needed, you go for that. Okay, and 10 or 20 times. Okay, and hope that there will be an expansion and go for 10 or 20 times. We are easily getting good throughput systems. Okay, and look for what technology you want, what design qualification. Design qualification, you have to be very careful. Okay, sometimes you buy an electrolyte analyzer, but it cannot be used in urine. Okay, so then for urine you have to go for another test or another equipment. So whatever design qualification, what it is meant for, okay, that you check it. Okay, and say after checking what are the instruments available, what is the throughput, and what is the technology, what exactly you want, okay, around what figures you want, okay, then you have to prepare and you have to convince your management. There will be always some people to get convinced, okay, and what point you are going to sell, okay, and better to sell a vision, okay, from this much time. When you get this equipment, in 6 months my TAT will come down like this. I will be able to cater this much people. Okay, our lab will grow like this. Okay, that type of vision we can sell, and most people will be asking you about the return on investment and economical point of view. All the things you have to be prepared. You should know what is happening in your lab currently, and what is the projected things. And all that knowledge you should have. Just like that you should answer, and you should get this approval and all. Okay, after that you have to call for a proposal. Okay, that means you have to communicate to the equipment committee, say companies, to submit a proposal or something like that. For that you need a brief specification. Okay, so the specification should not be too narrow and it should not be too wide. If the specification is too narrow, okay, somebody may pull you to the court of law saying that it is a tailor-made specification. It is fitting to only one particular okay company or something like that. Okay, if it is too wide, what will happen is okay, many different equipments will come in, and you will not be able to compare. And if your institution is having the habit of say taking the minimum okay, there is a minimum amount, okay, so minimum expensive thing, then you will be landing up in a very bad equipment or something like that. So just balance it. Okay, you used to get this. Okay, what is this? What is this photo about? Okay, so you can okay, the sales people ask to always sale people always tell about this thing. We cannot compare apple and orange. Apple is different and orange is different. Okay, don't get too many different types of equipment into the same deal. Okay, so try to your specification in such a way that you will be focusing on whatever you need, a small narrow set of equipments. Okay, that much focus you have to get, and it should not be too narrow to say lock down to one particular company or something like that. Okay, so don't try to compare apple and orange. So like that you have to make the comparison okay, much more okay, realistic. Okay, then after that, you design an evaluation protocol, how you are going to evaluate the machine. Okay, so for that, you are better. What I follow is I will give a format asking for a detailed specification. Okay, so first when we are calling for the quotation, we are not giving a detailed specification. But when we are asking, say after say identifying few instruments, we are asking for detailed specification. One thing, this will give a good knowledge about the equipment and it will make us to compare between the equipments. Other thing is that this will officially make them to okay, agree on the all the components. Otherwise, what will happen is if you don't get this detailed specification at the time of negotiation, they will keep on reducing their price, and one by one they will remove the modules inside. Okay, and at the end you will not get what you are intended to get. Okay, many modules will not be there, and they will might have negotiated for a very good price, and the modules will not be there. Okay, this will happen even in common equipments. Once we negotiated one ABG analyzer, okay, and that fellow has removed the coaximetry, and once we want to measure the okay, methyl hemoglobin, and I am asking why the methyl hemoglobin is not coming in this machine. Then he said co-oximetry is not included. Okay, then like that you may end up in okay trouble. So now we have to fix him. So get every specification possible. Okay, and say then there is a evaluation protocol, performance evaluation protocol. You make it. Okay, like this. You make objective things. Okay, you first keep the goal post. Okay, you set the goal post and prepare a level ground for all these instrument company people to play. Okay, and then let them play so that we will get a good competition. Okay, if there is a good competition among them, then we'll get a good result. So we'll get a good equipment at a reasonable cost. For that, we have to be transparent and we have to put a protocol. Okay. So right, I will show you one such protocol. Right. This is for a semi-auto analyzer. Okay, I am asking for the cost and all. Cost in Indian okay rupees, and I am asking about the light source. I am asking about the flow cell. I am asking about the parameter setting. I am asking about the memory. What is it? Say interfacing is possible or not? Weight, lamp cost, tube cost. Okay, cleaning solution cost, probe. Okay, guarantee period, number of preventive maintenance, response time in case of breakdown, guaranteed uptime. Okay, consumer support availability hours, service engineer where he will be. Okay, what will be the AMC charges? Okay, all that thing. Okay, and after asking all these technical specification and service specification, I am giving a protocol to him, and the protocol says that we will be doing a precision run on a sample of approximate value, and then there will be a okay, this will be a carryover run. Okay, carryover run like that. I am giving them, this is the protocol for performance evaluation, and this will be run on all equipments for comparison, right? Like that, I am giving a protocol. This is for a semi-auto, and we have got such a protocol for the fully auto also. And fully auto, we have got it runs in around 17 pages or something like that. Okay, so that is okay. That's how for biochemistry part we have got some 17-18 pages. For immunology part we have got 17-18 pages, and for say middleware we have got some 17-18 pages. Like that, we have got a detailed specification, and we have got a say detailed say evaluation also. At the end of the evaluation, I will show you what is what we got. Okay, this is a comparison we have made. These are the few parameters we have compared, and see the precision. We are comparing the precision. This particular company, I have hidden the identity of the company. Okay, all other companies are giving somewhat the CV percentage of 1%, 0.6, and all these things. One particular company is giving for ALT 10.6%, for creatine 7.4%. Like that, we will know about the company, how their equipment is performing by the okay on transparent performance evaluation. Okay. Right. Okay, then after getting the all information, you go for the instruments demo. Instrument demo, there you have to verify your specification. Whenever the instrument demo is shown to you, ask them first, listen to them completely, and after that ask them to open the cover and show the process one unit by another, what was there. Okay, and say, check with the whatever specification they have submitted, whether it is there or not. Okay, and see the how the workflow, and whenever the workflow is there, see where will be the in which part of the process there will be a chance for carryover and all these things. Look for any clues for okay, any okay, any poor designing. Okay, and you are, as you are seeing the equipment itself, maybe in some other lab you will be able to see the performance there and all these things. Just keep your eyes open and okay, see what is happening in the instrument. After that, ask them to run a protocol. Okay, and when you are running the protocol, you don't run it. Okay, you never touch the equipment for yourself. Okay, then they will claim that poor performance is due to your intervention. Okay, and make okay, be sure that you are witnessing all the things. Okay, if you don't witness, they will change all the things. Okay, so so you go there, you witness, and okay, get your performance evaluation done. Okay, and the performance evaluation you are going to analyze it. For any equipment, okay, there are so many performance characteristics, and out of that, for an instrument, precision is the most more towards the instrument than the reagent or anything. And another thing is the carryover. So mainly look for the precision and carryover, and look for any evidence of how is the uptime, how they look like, say, sturdiness of the equipment, what is the ease of operation. Okay, all these things you look at, but mainly you focus on the precision. That will give an idea about how good the instrument is. Okay, this is for instrument. For reagent, what you have to do is you have to go for which method is okay, you feel that will be good. Okay, so that method you have to look for, and you go for an appropriate pack size. Okay, and be careful, because some people will sell the inappropriate pack size, very big pack size, and at a little cheaper cost. You will be comparing the pyramidal cost, and the cost will come low, and you will order it. Okay, you will select it, and but the end you will be ending up with a very big pack size, and you have to more than half of these pack size you have to pour it into the brine. Okay, so just make it appropriate and ask them to similar pack size, ask them everyone to quote it, then only it will be comparable. It is your job to make it much more comparable, then only you can get the best out of it. Okay, in case of reagent, the sensitivity of the reagent, that will be the most thing. Linearity and sensitivity, it is like it's a difficult to balance. Okay, if you give good sensitivity, your linearity will come down. Okay, and if you are giving a much higher linearity, sensitivity will come down. Okay, you should understand this, and equipment, say reagent having a balance between these things will be a better choice. Okay, and for other things like interference and other specification, compare their okay, whatever specification they are submitting, you just you compare them. Okay, get the detailed specification and compare them. Okay, if you are negotiating for a closed equipment, okay, evaluate the reagent and instrument together, identify the key parameters. Okay, for example, you select one in okay 340 nanometer, one in 420 nanometer. You select an alkaline phosphatase, an SGOT, and commonly used glucose you can take. Okay, creatinine you can take, like that. If it is a immunoassay, select pick up one in a competitive mode, one in a sandwich mode, one with a lot of linearity like a beta SCJ, and one with a free T3 or T4, like that. You select a parameter where the trouble will be. Okay, and the most troubled parameters, if it's a say calcium, something in the biochemistry, the calcium, the equipment performance for calcium do matter, like that. You select the parameter wisely to evaluate the reagent and the equipment together. Okay, after selecting and evaluating all these things, you will be you may have to sit for negotiation at one point or the other point in your career. Okay, so when you are going for a negotiation, okay, you keep some few things in your mind. Okay, so if you are going to a negotiation, your whole day is going to be gone. Okay, don't get vexed, don't be in a hurry to go for attending a class or taking a class or another commitment or something like that. When you are going to a negotiation meeting, keep cool and cancel all the appointments and go there and sit. Okay, it is going to be a pure waste of time. They are going to talk the same thing again and again. Okay, just sit there and enjoy some cashews and be there. Okay, so they will be talking whatever they want to talk again and again, the repeated fashion. You also talk in the same way. Okay, you talk about your institution and all these things in a nicer way, right? And they will be there are some standard things they will tell about their quality is good, their cost is good, and then you have to negotiate in a different way. Okay, suppose they will not give a more than 2-year warranty, most of the people will not give. Okay, and you can ask for a 2 or 3 more years warranty, and if they say that that's not a standard practice or something like that, then you have to ask them whether they don't believe in their own equipment or something like that. There are some negotiation skills are there. Okay, so just sit back, enjoy the negotiation skill. It will carry on. Okay, so it may go to the evening, it may go into the night. Negotiation is a different thing. Okay, you learn about that and enjoy your negotiation. And at the end, you are going to buy one thing. Okay, it may not be always the best thing we are going to buy. We may buy the second best thing, but be aware of okay, until which quality you are going to allow, which quality you are not going to allow. Okay, there are many ways of buying. Okay, you can buy good things as a cheap price. That's the best way to buy. Okay, good things in a costly way. Okay, bad thing in a cheap way, bad thing in a costly way. And according to me, anything good, whether you buy cheap or costly, is going to be okay. Okay, that will serve your purpose. Okay, right? So that is how you have to go, right? And every equipment or every reagent purchase is a very big stone. Okay, stepping stone for your improvement of your lab. Use it very wisely. Okay, I will be happy to answer any of your queries.
Please post your queries in chat box.
All are saying thank you. Next time when you want to buy a equipment, you just call a friend and ask how good it is. Okay, that is also fine. But still, right? But all said and done, when you buy a very big equipment, okay, it comes down to be who is going to give a better service. You buy that. Okay, don't buy anything based on the performance or something like that. Very big equipments, buy who will serve you.
Thank you for this enthralling talk, sir. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Archana. He is our next speaker.
Moving on to the next session, we welcome Dr. M.P. Saravanan, Professor and Head, Biochemistry, Stanley Medical College, who did his UG in Madurai Medical College and post-graduation in Jipmer. Sir has organized Ambicon 2011 at KAP Vishwanathan Government Medical College. He backs the Gopalakrishnan Oration Award 2012. He also has 5 international publications. With his intense interest in lab medicine, he has inspired many young minds in the field of biochemistry. I kindly invite Dr. Saravanan. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. So, herewith we start with concepts of economics, but I'm not an economist. So, I'm putting the concept of lab economics in a very simple way. I mean, I'm sharing my lab experiences. Being an government person, so I am sharing my economics, how I can cut down my cost, how I can bring in economical way of doing the laboratory test. I cannot, and how do I prevent the wastage of reagents? How do I make the instrument work in optimal way? So for me, avoiding the wastage, making the instrument working in an optimal way is a very important thing. Of course, I have touched upon some of the concepts of private concepts of how they do the business based on the lab economics. So, next slide. So, everything is money. For me, the laboratory, not only laboratory, everything in this world is money. So the money is hidden. We cannot see money everywhere. But the things, it is expressed in terms of luxury, expressed in terms of object, expressed in terms of something else. So the money cannot be visible, but it is hidden inside. So, so lab is also like money. So these are all the things. So everything is money here. So your duty hour is, or the time is money, manpower is money. Am I audible? Infrastructure is money, pre-analyticals, instruments, wet chemistry or dry chemistry is money, knowledge, training, soft skills, all these things are all money. And you will see these things, how these things affect the lab economics, okay? And I want you to learn only two terms, activity-based cost, ABC. Another one is overhead. The rest of the economical term I cannot understand. So I want you to learn this term, ABC and overhead. ABC is a costing method that assigns overhead. It is simply nothing but it calculates indirect costs which are related to products and services. So ultimate result, so for example, glucose result, that result is calculated along with indirect costs, which will be seen now, and along with the services which are added for producing the result, right? So ABC is costing method which involves indirect costs to produce visible results. So overhead, again, it is nothing but related to indirect costs, not being directly related to the product. In our case, the results. In our case, the result is not calculated, not only calculated as reagent cost, it's QC cost or calibrator cost. There are other things which has to be considered, that we call it as overhead. That's it. So for example, I take the example of blood glucose. If you say one blood glucose, we'll see one value, but behind performing one blood glucose, these many things are involved. Glucose, mask, sprit cotton, plaster, blood agatiner, tubes. So if there is a big list of producing one blood glucose result. Okay. So these many things are involved in producing one blood glucose results. You can see even the instrument wear and tear, like centrifuge, instrument, RO water, reagent, AC, printer paper, computer maintenance, technician labor, admin charges, biomedical waste disposal. So many things are involved. Everything is money here. We cannot get it at free of cost, right? So this is one glucose. But again, if you look deep into the glucose estimation, the red things are recurrent expenditures. So glove, mask, sprit, cotton, centrifuge, wear and tear. So these are all the things are recurrent. I mean, centrifuge, wear and tear will not be included. Tips, reagent, biomedical waste disposal, printer paper, all recurrent thing. Whereas in the blue things, it's all recurrent, but the cost for producing one result of glucose is same as producing the 100 results. I mean 100 glucose. The cost of producing one glucose is equal to, I mean, will be similar to producing the 100 blood glucose test, right? The cost will be same. It will not be different for producing 30 blood glucose and for one blood glucose. One blood glucose is also same. 30 is also negligible if you consider RO water, QC calibrator. We are not doing continuous QC calibration for every glucose. We are not calculating instrument wear and tear for every blood glucose. AC computer, it works continuously for hours, right? The technician does the job, same job for one glucose as well as for 30 glucose. So this is minimal for if you do it in large volume tests, say, right? So there are two things involved in a particular test. One is recurrent Another one is, if you do it in large volume, that will be very profitable one. So that is the important thing. And the same way, the result producing also, for 1 glucose, it is 1 hour. The machine starting and the sample processing, loading, result, it takes at least 1 hour for getting 1 glucose. But the second, third, fourth glucose is like adding 10 seconds to every result. Say, for example, 30th glucose comes in 1 hour, 300 seconds. So you know that we have EM360. The first results come after 1 hour, then every 10 seconds you get the result. So it is like 1 hour, 6 minutes, you get 30th glucose. Okay. So only the first glucose is very costly. I mean, takes more time, and the subsequent results are, I mean, it is beneficial, it is economical, right? So again you go into this part. I said indirect cost. Indirect cost, how do you convert electricity into cost? Say, for example, if you are doing only the glucose in your lab and you're getting an electrical charge of 2,000 per month, and you are just doing 200 tests per month, the cost per one test is like 2,000 divided by 200. It is like 1 glucose costs around, I mean, the electricity charge is around 10 rupees. Okay. And how do you calculate, I mean, centrifuge wear and tear into cost? So the centrifuge maintenance is like, cost, say, for example, 1,000 rupees per month, and the electricity charges. So divide them. Accordingly, we can calculate the wear and tear into glucose charge, right? Similarly, RO water. If you use RO water, it say, for example, it costs around 20 rupees per liter. It costs 50 paise per ml. 1,000 ml divided by 20 rupees, it is like 50 paise. But if you use RO plant, it is less than 2 rupees per liter. It is like 5 paise per ml. So this cost has to be added. It looks, RO water is not visible in the cost of the glucose, but we are using RO water, and say it is like 5 paise per ml. And if you are using semi-auto analyzer, the volume of water will be less, and accordingly you have to calculate the water usage also. Okay. So again, the time is money. What is it? Okay, as I said earlier, the time is money. So this is a table which shows the workload of RSM laboratory, where we do 150 glucose tests every day, and the RFT is about 110 tests, and LFT 50, and bilirubin 50. But for doing these processes, so one test, I mean, the sample reception, data entry, centrifugation, loading into a machine, checking for I values, all these things, if you do one test, it takes 1.5 hours. Average time is like 3 minutes for glucose. So for doing 150 tests, it is like 450 minutes, and RFT takes 330 minutes, and LFT takes, if we have more tests, so it takes 500 minutes, and bilirubin 200 minutes. But it is not like 450 minutes, 7 hours for doing 150 tests. The technician is doing multitasking actually. He or she is doing centrifugation when the sample is running there, or centrifugation is running, he or she will be doing other works like checking the values, entering the reports, talking to the patients, issuing the reports. So this is how the technicians experience bring in the good result, and at the same time they do maximum number of tests. Okay. So similarly, so all these things together, it takes 72 hours to finish all these tests, and we have 5 technicians there. It is like 14.4 hours of working hours is required to finish all these jobs. Actually, we prepared this chart for chart to show it to administrator, showing that the technician is working more than 8 hours and to get the more technician. So from this, we learn one thing: the working hour is in private sector. This working hours are meticulously calculated, and the work is extracted from the lab technicians. Accordingly, they calculate the working hours and the sample size, and they pool the technician in particular time, so that they get minimum number of technicians, a maximum output. That is the idea of calculating the working hours for each sample, right? So this is very important when we work outside. And government side, we have to, this is for getting the more technicians. So we are running short of technicians. So we are putting this calculation and showing to the administrator to get the technician. Of course, we achieved to get the more technician now. That's why instead of doing, bits and pieces, 1 or 2 samples, always do the tests in batches. Always do the test in batches. So batch is better than single test. So single is always costly. It is more manpower consuming, more wear and tear, more reagent consumption. So that's why you pool the sample always, not like doing it as single test. Electrolyte, one electrolyte. It is common practice in government side that one electrolyte, suddenly they go and do it. 2 electrolyte also they will do. It's not like that. So you accumulate of 15 or 20 samples at a time, and when you do it, so it is really economical. And this one table clearly shows, and this is an the number of samples and the packages. So how many samples can be performed per pack? This clearly says, if you do 1 test, 1 sample per day, you will be doing just 57 samples per packet. Similarly, when you do 5, it increases to 212 samples. So if you do 100 samples per day, then you can do around 640 samples per pack. That means if you do it in batches, volume, so you will be getting more number of tests from the pack, because for every other sample, the machine, suppose if you do 1 sample, between sample, the machine goes in for maintenance clear and the maintenance was, and it goes in for 1 point calibration and stabilization, everything it does with the reagent only. If you do continuous loading, this process will be stopped. So it just do the analysis, and after every 10 or 15 samples, it does 1 point calibration. So this is how the things goes on. So that's why it is always advisable to run the sample in batches rather than doing it in single or 1 or 2 samples at a time, right? So again, the manpower is money, because in private sector, this manpower is very much calculated, and the really the uptake of technician is calculated as per the sample load. And we all know that the major lab expenditure is salary. 50% of the lab expenditure is salary. The support services like other like IMS and the sample collection boys, all those things comes around 23%. And reagents comes around 14%, and others like consumables. So this comes around 6%. So, but in government sector, we don't bother about all these things. So salary, we don't bother. Support service, we don't bother. Reagents, we don't bother. Okay, others also we don't bother. Our job is to maintain the optimal usages, avoiding the wastages, and preventing the the wastage of consumables and optimal use of it. Many times we buy reagents and it will be expired sometimes. Sometimes we get more reagents which are of not use instead of getting the useful reagents. So like that, so we have to calculate the manpower and the, So this manpower is money in the sense, appropriate manpower is required to run the sample load, right? So again, I said, derive maximum sample load when more technicians are all. This is a mantra for a laboratory. So you bring in you post technicians maximum to the maximum level when the more sample is there. For example, in our side, the IP and OP samples are accumulated only after 12 o'clock. I mean, after 1 o'clock. So we have signed duty roster so that the more technicians are available on the afternoon rather than in the morning, right? So yeah. So government side, these things are all not. We are not being taken care. Of course, the administrator has to take care of these things also. Support services, reagents, everything matters here. So for administrators, cost of services has to be calculated. They have to make reagent inventory, optimal use of technicians and other support services. Okay. What matters on the private sector is they do all large volume tests or samples in their lab and they pool it actually. They will do it as a single group, try to do it in the maximum in the single group rather than doing it in batches or patches. Okay. And another important thing is they do large volume tests in their lab and small volumes they will be outsourcing it or they doing it in pools, right? And another important thing is whether to do it by dry chemistry or wet chemistry, and you know the cost of each one. The dry chemistry costs more than the wet chemistry. And the important thing about the government sector is inappropriateness. Of course, this holds good for private sector also. Inappropriateness is the important point. That means whether that investigation which are requested is properly used or whether it really reaches the patient service or not. That is an important point on the government side. When this study, this study clearly says the inappropriate usage of laboratory usages. Okay, these are all so many studies done in different authors, different places. I can quote the inappropriateness of test here. Yeah. Sorry. Is it visible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Say, for example, this study shows, Bigel et al., 1985. Clear? Ordering more than one set of electrolytes within 24 hours, it's not necessary. Clear? And another study says the testing was excessive. The another study says the test results was not abnormal. Wait. Is it okay? The result was not abnormal and did not lead to diagnosis not suspected from initial evaluation or change in therapy. Okay. And you can see here. See, the test was not used for, did not add or exclude diagnosis, change treatment, or monitor treatment, was not associated with a specific note describing impact. Okay. Okay. And here one more study shows that tests not justified patient conditions or results of other tests, right? So there are a lot of studies showing that the inappropriate usage of laboratory which really cost to the administration, really cost to the hospital management. They are unnecessarily wasting the reagents and manpower and of course the money. Money is being wasted unnecessarily by doing inappropriate tests. Many times our house surgeons enthusiastically write all investigations. So many times they didn't collect the report back, and the reports were, I mean, twice being collected. One in one in emergency ward, another in one more time in the ward itself. So like that, the tests were done inappropriately, not being put into use for patient care. Okay, right. So this is another study. Is it visible? Is it clear? Thank you.
Yes, sir. It's clear, sir.
Just a minute. Yes. Okay, so this study shows the cost analysis of clinical chemistry laboratory in the era of automation. This study quotes some of the cost analysis which is inevitable. Say, for example, which we have to spend money on this, and the things has to be spent for the wastage. Say, for example, approximately 10% of the reagents are in the flux as they are ejected in 7 days of time. Some of the reagents are being not used because the machine says it is expiry after some time. So 10% of the reagent being wasted like that. And we have to use our reagents for running the dual controls. Okay. And 5% repeats every day due to sample issues like dilute, hemolyzed, ectric, chylous samples. All these samples, 5% of the samples were being repeated every day. And the cost of deionized water is not being used, not being calculated. The cost of the printer paper is not included. So the cost analysis should include the wastage of these reagents, and including the RO water, printer paper, and the 3-level calibrator. So all these things has to be taken into care of your cost analysis when you do the budget for purchasing the reagents, right? And we know the difference between the dry chemistry versus and the wet chemistry. Naturally, the wet chemistry costs less compared to dry chemistry. The cost per test for wet chemistry is for glucose is 1.1 rupee 83 paise. So for the workload of 200 samples, this study is done with this particular group of thing. So this is 7.35. Here it is 1.83. Urea is 2.94, 11.55 for urea in dry chemistry. Of course, the dry chemistry costs more, yes, than the wet chemistry, right? So accordingly, we have to decide, as Dr. Jayachandran said, whether we have to, the purchase of instrument has to be decided based upon your concept that whether to go for dry chemistry or wet chemistry, right? So I am quoting following things as important issues for cost-effective way of doing it. Infrastructure is money. You have to meticulously plan your laboratory structure, laboratory space, which should be very optimal for keeping the instrument, which should go in flow actually. So you keep autoanalyzer at one point, electrolyte analyzer at some other distant end, so that will not create any ergonomic flow. So you have to think of the flow of samples in a particular laboratory. And of course, earthing, we cause a lot of problems with this earthing when we were in different building. So it caused frequent breakdown of equipment and error reports. So please consider this earthing also when you go for infrastructure design. So then planning of RO plant. Actually, in our old building, the RO plant was kept in the roof. The lab was in the first floor. So often that the technicians assigned to do the maneuvering of the RO plant, washing, backflush, she has to go to top floor, and there that stray dogs are staying there, and sometimes they try to attack on our technicians. The rat will be, big rat will be coming. So that caused a lot of a problem in RO plant maintenance, or that's why that caused a problem in the instrument. RO plant is not functioning properly, frequent breakdown with the RO plant and frequent breakdown with the instrument. So you have to plan RO plant which is very closer to your lab, very close to or on the corner of your laboratory. And air conditioning is very, very important. So the air conditioning is the important part of the infrastructure. You know that machines and the reagents, many of the machines are very sensitive to temperature, and the reagents are very unstable. Samples will be becoming unstable. It causes degradation, evaporation, right? And yes, and the ergonomic flow. So you have to plan. You have to leave the space. You have to keep the space for the equipment to vent heat dissipation, and of course the washing area. All these things has to be designed. Ergonomic flow has to be designed. Yeah, this is about temperature of infrastructure. So this is already discussed. Okay, so the ergonomic flow, the keeping different equipment in different areas, that again causing the problem to technicians. Sometimes they skip their job. So for example, our thyroid analyzer is kept in somewhere else, our chemistry analyzer is in a different room. So if that main technician is not coming that day, that another technician who are posted for doing thyroid analysis will not go and do the test. So you have to keep the equipment within the same range of working area, rather than keeping in different area and different room, different requirements. We have to make provisions for that room. Again, that's a difficult job. And say for example, a machine is giving wrong value, you have to cross check with another equipment that is kept in another room. Again, it creates problem. And you have to keep the standby equipments, which also should be there in the same thing. Fridges in different room, machine in the same room. Again, it will cause problem in the testing. And important thing is RO plant. And yeah, that should be kept very close by. Okay, so the important thing is the technician should know, say for example, power socket replacement. Or chinna or power fuse maathradhukku theriyadhu, adanala pathina breakdown. So again, the breakdown is we are not running the sample, delay in sample, again economic loss. And first level maintenance, or say for example, fully automated analyzer, sample aspiration illa abdina, odane you have to check that flow is there happening in the probe, and the fountain wash olunga irukanu check pananum. The mari panna therinum. Centrifugation process olunga nadakudha, whether the centrifugation is done properly or not. Sometimes they don't do proper centrifugation, so the fibrin thread will block the sample probe. So again, it causes error. So we have to know the processes also, right? So for example, interferences. One of our technician said, sir, we are potassium 11.6 kuduthom sir. So she reported 11.6 potassium. I happily said, have you checked the color of the sample? Yes, sir, we have checked the sample. The sample was very red in color. Then, because he doesn't know the hemolyzed sample will give high values. Okay, so again we asked excuse from the clinicians. So the samples were repeated. So again, it's a waste of sample analysis, delay in the therapeutic services to the patient. Okay, so the knowledge on QC is important, calibration is important. Everything is money. If the wrong result goes, it causes economic loss, reagent loss, delay in reporting, reputation to the clinicians. So everything is money in the laboratory, right? Soft skill is money. So if you should have good communication skill with the technicians. So you should not fight with the technicians. You should not fight with the patients. You should not fight with the low-grade staffs. So soft skill is very, very important, right? And of course, we should be very much trained in the soft skills also. Okay. And in our setup, this is one I want to show this roster. Our problem is manner. So, and handling the patient is a very big issue. We have made, yes, we have made different postings like phlebotomy area, public relation, okay, reception. So that different postings, mainly the public relation, we have created one thing called public relation, talking to the patient, getting the whether the patient is in fasting or postprandial, whether to come today or getting the result on some other day. So all these things started out our issues on OP collection area, which runs very smoothly actually. So the communication skill is very important, very important. Okay, so please consider soft skills development also. That is also money. You know very well that private sector and the technician is scolding me, right? Like that, the complaint will come. And he or she didn't tell me about how to come for sample collection, when to come for again one more getting the result. So all these things are very important. Soft skill is very important. Of course, for running the department is also soft skill is important, right? And training, frequent training is important. RO plant maintenance, fully automated analyzer, rejection criteria, critical care alert, phlebotomy training, pipetting. So all these things, everything is money. So for example, training sample rejection. So he or she, the technician should aware of hemolysis sample and what are the results affected by hemolysis sample, ectric sample, what are the results affected by the ectric sample. So often they do just like that. They take the sample, they do hemolysis sample, they do potassium, they do lactate, they do LDH levels, all these parameters will be affected, you know very well. And bilirubin, they do creatinine and AST, that will cause negative interference with these assays. Highly, the ectric samples will cause negative interferences with the creatinine and AST, ALT. So that can be avoided so that you avoid unnecessary tests, you can avoid unnecessary delay also, right? Yes. So again, I am telling you, low volume tests, it can be pooled and it can be outsourced, right? And you should aware of consumables. What are the consumables required, like tips, cups, and other things, right? Your what is that? Other reagent consumables which are required for that. And important thing is inventory maintenance is very essential, right? So these are the knowledge required for running the laboratory, and you should maintain. See, this is a table which we follow there. So whether that all in one table, like you see from that all in one table, you can clearly see whether all instruments are working or not. Okay, so not like going and closely by seeing the register, saying that the machine is working or not. So yeah, so keep a chart saying that these factors are being appropriate for that day. So these are the small things which improves the quality of this thing. And here wastage is money. In our laboratory, sometimes the water filling, the can water fill panama, they just open the tube, they go off. Okay, so the entire floor will be filled with RO water. You know, on RO, 1 liter of RO water costs around 25 to 30 rupees. So they entirely wash with RO filter, RO water wash, floor wash with RO water. So it all initially happened. Now it is because of training. Now it is all minimized. reagent usage in use. Now it is being trained. Sometimes a double reagent, R1, R2, they use R1 more, R2 will be, the R2 will be used inappropriately. So again, one reagent will be wasted. Low volume test, they do it like randomly. Like jerk reaction, they do TSH, one sample, they go and run with the TSH thyroid analyzer. Now we ask them to stop it and do it in batches. That reduce the usage of reagent. And again, reagent topping. So we found that the topping of a reagent causes error in the calibration, reporting. So then you use new reagent. They discarded the entire. Suppose the technician comes in another ship, he discards the entire the reagent which is there in the previous shift and adds new reagent. So that caused a lot of reagent waste. Now we have made arrangements to avoid this unnecessary wasting of reagents. Okay, right. So again, say for example, the machine is continuously switched on. Say for example, fully automated analyzer continuously being switched on. So even if the test is not being done, for example, EM360, the lamp power, the lux hour is 1000 hours. If it is continuously on, 1000 hours, it is like 24 hours. It hardly comes for about for 40-50 days only. Okay, so it should be switched off. It should be switched off when the tests were not done. And of course, in case of semi-auto analysis, the peristaltic form is so you should know when to replace the peristaltic. It is not like continuous usage. Again, filters also has life if the light is continuously on, right? And again, water is money. We should aware of water source TDS. So when we are in a summer period, the source water TDS will be very high, and the consumable will be very the filter and the membrane change will be required more at the time of the maintenance will be required more at the time of summer period than the winter period or the monsoon period. For example, summer period, the water source TDS will be like 3000 here, whereas during monsoon period, the water source will be like 500 to 600. So that time, the final output TDS will be very, very achievable. Whereas summer it is difficult, so it requires more maintenance or membrane change. The filter change is required at the time of summer period than the and you have to keep the and this is sometimes we have to work out the cost versus benefit. Okay, say for example RO if you purchase from outside, it is 25 rupees per liter. So here in our RO plant, we are taking 500 liters per day. So for year, we are consuming around 1,82,000 liters of water every year. And the maintenance of RO unit is like 1 lakh per year. So divided by 1 lakh, it is like 1.8 rupees per liter. Okay. Right. So you should not hesitate to invest on the maintenance. We often, in our side, people hesitate to invest on the maintenance and the consumables. The spares which are required to maintain the RO plant. So we have faced our hard times when the RO plant is running out of condition. So we spend lot money when the RO is not running. So now we have made the administrator to realize that how much economical when we are running with the RO plant. So now the administrator is so they are maintaining and the maintenance were done. Pakka. Okay, so an important part is the clinician knowledge. Clinician knowledge, because of the lack of knowledge on the laboratory aspect, often we repeat and they fight with the process which we are doing. Later, why you are making this much delay, and the results were not correlating with the clinical conditions. அப்படியெல்லாம் fight வரும். So, for example, they send glucose in delayed way, like low volume sample, delayed, and you send low glucose, they won't accept. Again, live samples, because of the wrong procedure, rough procedure, the samples were obtained as light sample. That again causes error in the potassium value and other values. And yeah, sometimes one sample and one VIP sample, do it immediately, no other go, we have to do it. Again, it's an economic loss. So we have to advise the administrator, and yeah. And consumable is money. We know that not only the reagent, but also the sample cups, tips, collection tubes, cotton, gloves, spread, sedimentation filters, and membrane for your RO plant, maintenance kits and PM kits for your machine, printer papers, everything is money, actually, right? And sometimes we have to we have to calculate the risk rather than the price. Calculate the benefit over the cost. This one simple example between the syringe collection and the vagutainer collection. And is it clear? So syringe collections, suppose we go for 10 ml volume, we have to go for 10 ml syringe. And 1 or 2 tests, we go for the 5 ml syringe. So different volume syringes are required for syringe collections, whereas this is single prick is sufficient. No need to go for different syringes here. And the delivery to the difficult. After collection, the the delivery to the tube is difficult. Here it's not a problem, it's an auto section. Volume may not be accurate, here volumes are accurate. Multiple collection is difficult. Here it's very easy. The important thing is the needle stick injury here in syringes. Here it is less likely. And again, it creates a lot of biomedical waste. It is less, comparatively less. Of course, the cost is more on the vagutainer side. The cost is less, but calculating the benefit over here with the syringe and vagutainers. So this sometimes the administrators question about the cost rather than hearing about the benefits of using the vagutainers. So we have to, as a laboratory head, we have to advise the administrator saying that the benefits of going for particular procedure or particular system. So that we have to meticulously work and convince the administrator saying that this is advantageous and beneficial over the when it is looking over the cost. So that is also our job. Sometimes the policy making or decision making are made with our suggestions. Another important thing is we are proud to say that we are cutting the cost because we make our in-house reagents. This is these are all our reagents, very simple reagents. Previously, when Dr. Jayanti was there, she used to make glucose, AST, ALT reagents, and of course, she made an attempt to prepare reagents for the electrolyte analyzer also. That was successful for one particular company. Again, they stopped it. But still, we continue that era of Dr. Jayanti. We made our protein biuret reagent, BCG reagent, picric acid. Yes. So these things look simple, but annual profit of, it is a worth of 12 lakhs, 73,000 worth of reagent being prepared. This cost is derived based on the, CPC list. The cost per ml is calculated based on the CPC list. This comes around 12 lakhs. If you purchase these reagents through CPC or government, this will cost another 12 lakhs to our institute. But we are still using it, preparing it, so that cuts down our cost. So this is another important thing. Yes. Of course, your RO plant is very cheaper. As we discussed earlier, RO plant is very, very cheap. So maintain it, Paka. Is it clear? Yes. So, yeah. So to come to the final thing, so we have to cost cutting, whether to go for closed system or open system, high volume or low volume, whether to run it in batches or patches. So do it in batches. Reagent wastage has to be worked out. We have to make the pakka inventory whether how many tests run per day, how much reagent is being used. So that inventory is very important. Electricity usage. So run the maximum tests during the maximum technician hours. Otherwise, switch off AC and electricity, cut down the cost for that. And policies on regular tests and emergency tests. Don't do all the tests all the time. So you fix 2 times like regular tests up to 1 o'clock. After that, only the emergency tests were done. So thereby we cut down the cost, wear and tear of the equipment, and laboratory technicians hour is also being reduced. In-house reagent is another way of making the cutting down the cost, and the repetition of tests can be avoided. Right. So all these things are some of the hints. You can make your own list. Right. So to come to final point. Again, I'll go to the same summary, right? So this is the one: time, power, infrastructure, instruments, knowledge, training, soft skills, everything matters in the laboratory economy. So if you are very good in that, we can run a lab in a pakka economical way, and yeah, it's the best way without causing much loss, unnecessary loss. We can run an optimal lab. I mean, optimal way of, we can do the lab in an optimal way, right? So thank you very much. Right? So everything is money, right? This is the motto, this is the mantra of laboratory. Any doubt?
Thank you, sir. Now
Bye.
I would like to invite Dr. Mohammed to introduce our next speaker.
The next speaker, Dr. Angel Mercy, Assistant Professor of Biochemistry, Sri Venkateshwara Medical College Hospital and Research Center, Pondicherry. She has academic experience of 4 years. She was awarded IFCC Task Force Young Scientist Award in the National Conference, Con 2016, Mangalore, and she has won various awards and prizes in International Conference, ICON 2022, conducted by AVMC Pondicherry. She has published research articles in index journals. I kindly invite Dr. Angel. Over to you, ma'am.
Very good morning to everyone. I'm Dr. Angel, Assistant Professor in the Department of Biochemistry from Sri Venkateshwara Medical College. The topic I'll be talking upon today is on harmonization of the clinical chemistry lab. So before I go to the topic as such, I'd like to start with a small scenario. So here is a patient, Mr. Tim, who's gone to visit his doctor for complaints of feeling more hunger than usual over the past few months. He has a history of diabetes in his family. So he went to see his doctor to just have a checkup. For that, his doctor advised him to get a fasting glucose sample tested. So Mr. Tim went home, and the next day he did a fasting glucose test in a lab beside upset. He told him, no, I'd prefer if you do a test in the lab that is attached to my hospital. So finally, he had to be fasting for another day, and he gave a second sample to another lab. So the next day, when he went back to the doctor, he got 2 results. The doctor was a bit confused. The first lab gave a result on a plasma glucose of 5.5 millimole per liter, and his lab gave a result of 115 milligram per deciliter. So now the doctor is confused, and he thought, why don't I ask my lab to check it again? And since we already have the sample, he didn't ask anything about the storage conditions or anything. He just asked his laboratory people to compare it with another laboratory. So they also, without any further information, they sent the sample by evening to another laboratory. And on the next day, they got a third result. So it was 88 milligram percentage. So when the doctor saw these 3 results, basically what he saw was none of the three results were equivalent to each other and there was a lot of variation between them. So this is a scenario that is quite common in our community. Maybe the third lab is a bit imaginative, but most of the time doctors usually ask the patients to go and get their samples done in a lab that they prefer. So finally, the question that arose was which lab result is correct, which is a good lab. So what's the problem? Where did it go wrong? So Dr. Bachman is renowned for her work in method validation and verification. And she stated that the fact that methods are not harmonized is probably one of the most critical problems facing the field of laboratory medicine today. So problem number one, according to her, is that methods are not harmonized. Dr. Greg Miller is renowned for his work with relation to harmonization in laboratory medicine. And he stated that a large number of tests are not standardized, and yet we have clinical guidelines that say if the value is greater than X, then you do this or that. So according to him, problem number two is that we are very sincere in following our clinical guidelines, but we are not yet having proper standardized protocols or procedures. So based on that, I'd like to start the outline of my talk, which is what is harmonization? Why is it needed? What is the scope of harmonization? Harmonization in the phases of the laboratory testing process, harmonization and standardization, the non-identical twins, how to achieve harmonization, what are the barriers towards achieving it, and the global efforts towards harmonization. So to begin with, what is harmonization? Any process that enables the establishment of equivalent reported values. So they are within clinically meaningful limits produced by different measurement procedures for the same measurement. So basically, despite the differences and inconsistencies between labs, we should be able to give mutually compatible, uniform, and reliable results. So what is currently happening is, like in this scenario, a patient has given his blood sample to 3 different laboratories and he got 3 different results. And in the end, it was difficult to apply a valid clinical guideline and plan on further management. But what should ideally happen is that a sample, even though it's given in any number of different labs, eventually it should be able to it should give equivalent results which are harmonized so that a valid clinical guideline can be applied and that will be beneficial to the patient's outcome. So why do we actually need harmonized results? So with relation to the patient, obviously the patient safety. Misinterpretation of results is obviously going to be a risk for the patient. Then we need harmonized results in order to apply and as well as set clinical guidelines for further management of the patient or diseases. Then harmonization also is required to overcome the problems with relation to patients getting access to different laboratories. Patients usually face difficulties like with relation to distance, cost, insurance limitations. But if we have harmonization of results, this problem can be overcome. And then an important goal of our lab, which is having electronic patient records. The patients need not bring their results from day one and carry it around. They should be able to have access to results wherever they go for getting further management. Apart from the patient, we also have organization-related issues like it is required. Harmonization plays an important role with relation to accreditation, which gives importance to trueness and metrological traceability. And then with relation to consolidation projects, it is very beneficial if we have harmonized results. And further, clinical governance. Obviously, our administrators are going to have concerns if patients are not satisfied with the results that they're getting. So based on this, what is the scope of harmonization? Harmonization is not limited to any single part of the laboratory process, but it involves the total testing process. This is basically a brain-to-brain loop. This is basically a brain-to-brain loop which begins from the physician, and it's called as the pre-analytical phase. When the physician decides on what test has to be given based on a clinical diagnosis that he suspects. Next, the sample, the request is sent to the lab, and then it comes into laboratory process of the pre-analytical, analytical, and the post-analytical phase. Following which it goes to the post-analytical phase, which is again at the point of the physician where he decides on what further action has to be taken. So with relation to the total testing process and to today's topic, I'll be talking mainly on harmonization in our laboratory processes. So to begin with, in the pre-analytical phase, one common thing in the pre-analytical phase is with relation to nomenclature. We use various different terminology across the labs. Like for instance, with relation to vitamin D estimation, the clinician may ask for a vitamin D. Some may consider it as 25 hydroxyvitamin D. Some may use vitamin D2, vitamin D3. So it comes under different names. And some laboratories, they use abbreviations instead of the full name. Creatinine kinase total is given as CK total. So in such relations, terminologies differ from lab to lab. And then the practices of reflex testing. Reflex testing is followed by certain labs and it's not followed by certain labs. And another more common problem with harmonization is with regard to our testing profiles. So if you see some laboratories, they may call renal function test as only urea and creatinine. Some may include electrolytes in that panel. Some may include even uric acid in that panel. So it's going to be varying from lab to lab. And in such a situation, it will be difficult for the physician as well as the patient. Apart from the request, it also has pre-analytical factors also involve the patient's preparation with relation to blood collection, the duration of fasting, the duration of taking a sample after a person has had some drugs. So all those factors also have to be considered, including storage conditions and transport conditions of the sample. So obviously, all pre-analytical factors play a role when it comes to the eventual results, and it can contribute to some amount of uncertainty in the results. Coming to the next phase, which is the analytical phase. So we have learned time on and again, like pre-analytical, and pre-analytical has the maximum number of contribute to the maximum number of errors in the laboratory process, and followed by the post-analytical, and the analytical is just around some 7 to 13%. But how much of that analytical errors do we consider to be due to standardization, traceability, or commutability, and other factors? So let's see about standardization. Standardization is basically the ability to give equivalent results by metrological traceability to a fit for purpose higher order reference system. Basically meaning that the clinical sample is going to be relevant if I'm using calibrators that are traceable to a higher order reference system. Equivalent does not mean identical. It means that the results are within a total allowable error limit. And this will be consistent with the acceptable risk of harm from a decision based on that lab result. So standardization and harmonization, as I mentioned earlier, the non-identical twins. So standardization, I've already told, it will be traceable to a higher order reference material. What about harmonization? So when you look at harmonization, if you can look at the picture that is there in the bottom. So the first one, the purple stars indicate the patient's results. And these results can be traceable to a reference system, a higher order reference system, and so we consider those results tend to be reliable. Whereas harmonization addresses those tests that can't be calibrated with a or that can't be traceable to a higher order reference material. So thereby its scope is much more. Talking about metrological traceability. It is basically an unbroken chain of calibrations from the clinical sample result to a higher order reference system. So as you can see in the table over here, the type based on the reference measurement procedures and the availability of primary and secondary reference materials, the analytes that can be standardized have been classified into 5 categories. And if you see, the category 4 and 5 are categories which do not have adequate reference measurement procedures or reference measurement materials. To looking deep into the traceability chain, if you see, we are quite familiar with this chain. But as you see, with the increase in traceability, there is some amount of measurement uncertainty that also happens. One of the important things that we have to note when it comes to traceability of our results to a higher order reference material is the secondary reference materials, which should basically be a matrix-based commutable reference material. If the reference material is not commutable, there are chances that our traceability will break. So even though the manufacturer claims that they have traceability, but if it's not commutable, we are not going to get equivalent results across measurement procedures. So what is this commutability? Commutability is basically equivalence of the mathematical relationships between the results of different measurement procedures for a reference material and for representative samples from healthy or diseased individuals. So basically, if we have commutability of our reference materials and our clinical samples, they are going to have a similar relationship when they are analyzed across different measurement procedures. So why does it matter? So we can look at this scatter plot at the bottom, in which you can see that the reference materials are commutable with the clinical samples. And when they are analyzed with two different measurement procedures, they have a same relationship. But when the reference material is not commutable with the clinical samples, they do not have a same relationship. And if these non-commutable reference materials are used as calibrators, our clinical samples are also not going to give a similar relationship between two different measurement procedures. In such a situation, can it be overcome? Yes. If the bias is constant, a conversion factor can be set up, and then we can actually use it. But in such situations, one thing we have to keep in mind is this conversion factor will be specific to the measurement procedure for which it is applied. So now what if we don't have a suitable reference measurement procedure or reference material? So in such situations, we can, the manufacturers usually go about with a harmonization protocol to make the results equivalent from different measurement procedures. This harmonization protocol is usually based on a consensus pool of clinical samples, and they are used to calibrate the further stages of the traceability chain. If you see many, if you can see the picture at the bottom, many analytes are still yet to have, they do not have a standard reference material or a reference measurement procedure. Majority of the analytes go ahead with the harmonization protocol or the harmonization consensus group for a traceability to a reference material. So next, coming to our intra-laboratory comparability. So within a lab, usually large testing laboratories, they may have more than one instrument, right? Even small labs, they may have an additional instrument as a backup instrument. So in such situations, we have to ensure that both of our instruments are giving the same result. We cannot give one result in one instrument, like one instrument cannot give a result for creatinine as 1.0 mg per deciliter, and a second instrument cannot give a result of 1.8 mg per deciliter. Obviously, it's going to create confusion among the clinicians when such results are being released. So in such situations, we have to do comparability testing between our instruments, which is more commonly known as the inter-instrument comparison. And if we find some amount of difference, it is better to assess the need for adding a conversion factor. Or if a conversion factor is already set, we have to decide on whether it has to be changed. But just setting up a conversion factor is also not adequate. It has to be periodically reviewed, at least within a 6-month period. So CLSI guidelines are available for conducting such comparability testing between instruments within a laboratory. So another thing is when we have between method differences. So this is from a study by Almond et al. In 2012, where he ran a single patient sample for parathormone in 5 different analyzers. So when he ran the samples, he was able to see that there was a 3 to 4-fold difference between the analyzers with the lowest value of 54 to a highest value of 183. He stated that this could be due to non-commutable reference materials, and because the methods are similar, but they do not measure the same quantity, considering the isoforms of the parathormone analyte. So in such situations, method comparison also can be done in our laboratory, where we can assess whether which method is more precise by checking the CV percentage, and we can also see the amount of comparability between the methods by studying the bias as well as the total allowable error. It is preferable not to use 2 different methods while for analyzing a particular analyte, because even though if we set a conversion factor, periodic monitoring has to be done in order to ensure that we are giving adequate or more reliable clinical results. So next, coming to an inter-laboratory comparability, that is based on the scenario that we had seen earlier, 3 labs giving different results. So inter-laboratory comparability is essential so that we can have interchangeability of results or transference of results. There are a multitude of guidelines, but still we are only partially harmonized or unequivocal when it comes to our final results. And this is mainly because we have differences with relation to all phases of our laboratory process, and especially with relation to our analytical phase, we have differences when it comes to instruments, analytical methods, reagents, reagent lots, the calibration, commutability, and traceability. So in such a situation, we can go ahead with the inter-laboratory comparability testing. So this testing can be done by sending blinded samples to a different set of labs and by doing a statistical analysis to assess our bias and precision. But more commonly, more standardized way of doing it is by participating in the external quality assurance programs, which is done on a monthly basis, whereby external quality assurance provider is giving us a sample, and we are running the test. We send it back to them, and they get the results. So in this case, also it's blinded because we don't know who are the other laboratories participating. But this EQAS is beneficial to us because it helps us to compare the results across the various assay systems, and it also helps us to keep our inter-laboratory comparability in check. The EQA program and the proficiency testing programs have the additional benefit of not only inter-laboratory comparability, but it helps us also to monitor the success of any harmonization or standardization protocols that we implement in our lab. In addition to the external quality assurance programs, setting up of quality indicators at different levels of the analytical process will be even more beneficial with relation to harmonization of our laboratories. So finally, in the analytical phase, there are basically six pillars that hold up the harmonization, and three of them were given by the Joint Committee of Traceability for Laboratory Medicine. That is availability of certified reference materials, reference methods, and reference measurement laboratories. Beyond this, the reference measurement laboratories came up with three more pillars where they suggested the need of universal reference intervals and decision limits, accuracy-based external quality assurance, and harnessed terminology and units across the labs. So coming to the post-analytical phase, in which the last two pillars actually fitted into, the post-analytical phase also includes nomenclature or the terminology as mentioned in the pre-analytical phase. So a doctor, if he asks for one test, we cannot give a test report with another name. So it's better to have a harmonization between the pre-analytical as well as the post-analytical terminologies that we use. And in addition to the terminologies, the reporting units and the format. As you had seen in the scenario, all three labs, they had given different reporting units. In fact, the first lab and the third lab, which had milligram per deciliter, still one lab reported it as milligram per deciliter, the other one reported as mg percentage. So we should be uniform in our reporting units because that also can cause confusion to the physician. So most of the time, physicians and patients, they consider our results comparable based on the numerical value alone. There are many chances in which units are usually overlooked. So we actually play a role in overcoming that by ensuring that we have harmonization among our terminologies and among our reporting units. Another thing in the post-analytical phase, which is very important, is which comes with relation to the reference intervals, decision limits, and the critical values. So as mentioned earlier, the units and the numerical values or the measurements play an important part with reference intervals. As you can see in the table that is displayed on the side, harmonization has been suggested by many international organizations to be given under the SI units, but the problem is when it comes to standardization or lack of traceability to the SI units. In such situations, reporting results with the SI units are difficult. So most of our labs usually go ahead with the conventional units, but even within this conventional units, there is a lot of variation among the labs. So manufacturers usually include the reference intervals with their products, but they suggest that we adopt our own, and based on the CLSI guidelines, as mentioned in the first presentation, there are guidelines available on how to derive a reference interval of a particular population using a minimum of 120 samples, and deriving such reference intervals in a population may be beneficial, maybe more beneficial if it's evidence-based or more clinically based. So when reference intervals in a cross-section of labs show variability, it will obviously result in misinterpretation of results. As you can see in the graph that is on the right side, this graph shows the reference interval along with the reference intervals of the results in a healthy population along with that in the sick population and the decision limit that was decided. So if another lab is going to have a different reference interval, what happens is the decision limit that if it is still implemented on the change reference interval, it is going to cause the unnecessary treatment of people who are actually healthy or people who do not require treatment. So care has to be taken that when the reference intervals are changed, decision limits also have to be monitored, and similarly our critical value results also have to be kept in monitoring. So finally, how to achieve comparable results? So with relation to the analytical phase, mainly harmonization of standard procedures involving all phases of the testing process is required in order to achieve comparable results. In the analytical phase, calibration of all procedures traceable to a common reference system is needed. Then all measurement procedures should measure the same quantity. There are molecular differences for different analytes. So in such situations, it is essential for us to go beyond and know whether our measurement procedures are checking or measuring the same quantity, especially with relation to the composition. So, and last, it's not enough if we just implement all harmonization strategies. Surveillance to monitor and maintain consistent performance is the most important part, especially by our proficiency testing and quality indicators. So now finally, at the end of this, a lot of information has been given, but the main question arises as to who is responsible for this? Am I supposed to do this for my lab, or will the government do it? Or who's going to come and do all this? So let's just look into it. When it comes to laboratory protocols, the test requesting, the sample handling and reporting comes under the part of the local laboratories, where they should work together to ensure that there is harmonization among these. The next thing is with relation to clinical reports, the test names, the units, the reference intervals, and the decision limits. Therein comes the role of the local laboratories along with the joint efforts of the national organizations involved with laboratory medicine. And finally, the international organizations play a more important role when it comes to our technology and the information systems, the traceability and commutability of our measurement procedures and materials, and the clinical guidelines. But if you see in the end, it is all three levels, the local, national, and the international levels have to work hand in hand in order to make sure that harmonization is available throughout the testing process. So why haven't we achieved it yet? What are the barriers? As mentioned earlier, there is a lack of appropriate reference measurement procedures or certified reference material, and it is still ongoing in process for harmonization and standardization of several analytes. There is inadequate definition and specificity of the tested substances. And there is a lack of universally accepted protocols and oversight for information. Every lab will be happy to follow guidelines and instructions of a protocol, but this is lacking when it comes to harmonization. Different labs are giving different approaches towards harmonization. So as of now, a universally accepted protocol is not yet set in, but it is still in the process. And finally, a common factor which hinders many of the improvement processes is inadequate funding and other resources. So coming to the global efforts, we have many ISO guidelines which help us to go about harmonization. The International Consortium for Harmonization of Clinical Laboratory Results, that is the ICHCLR, works to coordinate the harmonization activities throughout the world. They do gap analysis to find out where we are missing out, in which steps are we missing out, and why are we lacking in this harmonization process. And this team is mainly mainly involves international organizations like American Association of Clinical Chemistry, the IFCC, ILAC, and FDA in vitro devices manufacturers. So as you can see in the small diagram below, we are trying picking up the low hanging fruit is what is happening. We do have analytes that are within the standardization and the harmonization process, but at the same time, we do have many routine analytes that are still not having harmonized processes, especially with lack of reference measurement procedures. So with that, the take-home message from my presentation is harmonization in our laboratory involves setting up of following the ISO guidelines, the CLSI guidelines, and having harmonized standard operating procedures at all phases. In the analytical phase, standardization, traceability, and commutability play a very important role for harmonization. and inter and intra-lab comparability is the responsibility for each laboratory, and monitoring it by doing external quality assurance and proficiency testing participation, as well as monitoring our quality indicators and taking up corrective actions based on our performance. And finally, terminology, the reference intervals, and decision limits. All these aspects, they contribute to the various phases of the lab in order for us to give right results in the right form. But only with our analytical phase, it's not going to work out. The pre-analytical phase is also required. That is a right test choice at the right time on the right patient, as well as the post-analytical phase, the post-analytical phase also plays a role. So with this, I'd like to end my presentation. I'd like to thank Dr. Ramesh sir, Dr. Sharbi madam, head of the department, and the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity to present this topic in the CME. Thank you.
Let's move forward to our next session, which will be delivered by Dr. Ramesh, Professor, Department of Biochemistry, Jipmer, Puducherry, who is instrumental in conducting this online CME. Sir has 24 years of teaching experience. He was awarded Most Popular Teacher to the first MBBS course during 2013-14. He is a researcher with publications in the field of lab medicine and has guided many MScs and MD students for thesis projects. Over to you, sir.
Okay. What I'm going to talk today is about something called evidence-based laboratory medicine. I think most of you must have heard about it. But what is the problem? Why I have preferred to talk about this? It's like magnesium. So one of the most ignored but an essential cations. Like this evidence-based aspect is totally, we are not using it. I'll just tell you, it is a just overview of everything. Okay. Sure. Clinicians are lab results for diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. Of this, diagnosis is by far the most important. For upon it, the success of other two depends. It's not any biochemist told by clinician. Okay. Then diagnostic application study allow the calculation of various statistics that provide an indication of test performance, then how good the index test at detecting the target condition. This is what about diagnostic accuracy study. We conduct lots of study by comparing two markers. One marker is better than the other, area under curve is better than this. So how complete it is, how complete our study. Take what is EBLM? It's conscientious, explicit, and judicious use of current best evidence in laboratory medicine for making well-informed decision. Okay. Then what are the components of it? Like individual expertise, best external evidence, and patient values and expectations. Even patient values or expectations are included in evidence-based laboratory medicine. So what is the justification for evidence-based laboratory medicine? What is the justification? Why do we need something called evidence-based laboratory medicine? And even for information, many colleges and many universities have even developed separate department for evidence-based medicine, in which evidence-based laboratory medicine is a part. Okay, so constant requirement for information. I'll tell just an anecdote for this. We had a seminar regarding renal markers sometimes back. Okay, there are lots of renal markers has been just, okay, what to say? It has been told that these are all the markers and these are all the conditions. Okay, so now if you want to go and see about, and lots of questions has been asked about individual markers. How this individual marker is very good, whether this is good or this is best or this is, how time is not sufficient. Within 40 minutes, we can't go and tell about everything about all these things. But there is constant requirement for information. Then how we are going to deal with it? Then there is also constant addition of new information, limited time availability, the poor quality of access to good information. There is a thing. The poor quality of access. Mostly many of our people, especially residents and all, they don't know how to get good information. And what is particular to laboratory medicine? Again, limited number of pure quality of studies linking best results to patient benefits. Again, you take any diagnostic accuracy study and see. So how much it has been contributed to patient benefits. Such kind of studies is very much lacking. We don't have that much evidence. Okay, even we are telling about serum creatinine, we get cystatin, NGAL, all those things in renal marker. But how it helps the patient and how it helps in making a different kinds of treatment. For that, we need proper evidence. The poor perception of the value of diagnostic test is another thing. Okay, go to the lab in the morning, then you know how much blood glucose and sodium values are coming. The ever increasing demand for tests, the disconnected approach to resource allocation. There's another aspect that we have to deal with the administration. Silo, it's called as silo budgeting, that we'll deal later. Then how to practice this evidence-based lab medicine? Ask, inquire, appraise, act, audit. These are the components. If you want to practice evidence-based, you have to ask, you have to acquire information, you have to appraise the information, and you have to act, and then you have to audit. You can see here. So you identify a question first. Okay, it can be any question, like a lab-related question. Okay, like how I have got some examples I'll tell later. How beta dendritic peptide helps to increase the stay in hospital for a patient with heart failure. You don't only go compare and do diagnostic accuracy study. So these are other things. And further, you search for evidence. Okay, critically appraise the evidence, then apply it to practice, to audit, and if something is there, you can modify it. Okay, then what is the first step? It's called PICO. I think many of you know about this: patient, intervention, comparison, and outcome. This for laboratory things, it has been modified as CARO. What is CARO? Case. Anything. First, what are the patient's characteristics, condition, symptoms, anything related? What is the case actually you're taking? Next is assay. What assay procedure is being considered, or what strategy is being considered? And reference. What is the standard procedure? Is there a comparator? And finally, what is the outcome? Whether it is sensitivity, specificity, predictive value, prognosis, what's the outcome do you affect? All those things. Then these are the questions. Okay, when you're picking up any diagnostic accuracy study, anything, you first try to write like this. You read the journal, read the article, read the review, anything, whatever it is. Then what are the types of questions? First one is regarding diagnostic accuracy of the test. You can see a patient presenting to the emergency department with shortness of breath. How well does what I told, N-terminal probe, beta dendritic peptide, predict heart failure as assessed by cardiac ejection fraction by echocardiography? So here we have condition is heart failure, patient presenting with shortness of breath, and again you are comparing with cardiac ejection fraction. And what to expect from it? So that is important. Okay, instead of cardiac ejection fraction, we're going to N-terminal probe, beta type dendritic peptide. What are the benefits for the patient? It can be accurate, it can be more sensitive, specific, everything is there. But how it is beneficial to the patient? How it is going to change your treatment or patient stay or your lab economics or your hospital economics? Again, related to the value of a test, improving patient outcomes. Again, the same thing. Patient admitted to the hospital for treatment of heart failure. Again, we're estimating N-terminal probe, beta dendritic peptide, improve the length of hospital stay and the rate of subsequent readmission for heart failure. Okay, so more studies can focus on all those things. That will give more important information about each test. Okay, they don't just go only for sensitivity and specificity or other things because they're totally related to analytical. But as previous speakers also told about critical decision limit, all those things, proper evidence for all those things. So you have to prepare and read journal properly. And even when you're designing a lab-related article to it. Now, how to acquire evidence? You must be asking, there are some evidence. How to acquire the evidence? Okay, before that, few words. So in laboratory medicine, an alternative clinical trial is diagnostic accuracy study. We don't have a clinical trial, though we participate in clinical trial as a supportive department, we don't have. But what is on par of us diagnostic accuracy study? And the best design for diagnostic accuracy study is prospective cohort study. You have a prospective, and it should be a cohort. Cohort maybe in this case, maybe patient with shortness of breath. Like that you design. Okay, and then you can compare with any gold standard. And again, I have purposely put gold standard. Nowadays, we are not supposed to use gold standard. It is called as reference standard. Okay. An important goal of studies of diagnostic test determine whether the new test adds information to the known from the patient observation or other investigation. This always we forget when you're designing any study. So what is the new test? You're doing some new test, lots of markers, but what is the information that it adds? That's more important to existing test. Okay, what information apart from sensitive specificity, is there any new information it adds? Okay, then how to start a search? Original studies, Cochrane library, journals, clinical evidence, and finally your computer system. This is what. So the base is original study. So always look into it. If you're not getting into original study, then we move on to Cochrane library. But the best to start the search is looking for external evidence-based guidelines. Actually, there are lots of external evidence-based guidelines. Okay, there are lots of external evidence-based guidelines. You can take the guidelines and you can adapt it. And the search for evidence usually starts in databases such as Cochrane Library, which contains high-quality systematic reviews or meta-analysis. So, this is the place where you go and search for evidence. It is a Cochrane Library. You go to the Cochrane Library and then you choose what you want. Lots of evidence-based guidelines are there. If search is not successful in the secondary literature, look for the primary reports in Medline. Okay. So at Medline, how will you go and search for this systemic review or evidence-based guidelines? The best single search term is sensitivity, error diagnostic test. Okay, you can see here, combined with corresponding diagnostic test, combined with corresponding clinical condition, and finally the name of the test. Okay, you went into the Cochrane library and you found some evidence for some other thing. So how will you determine the level of evidence? The highest level of evidence is a good quality, well-conducted systemic review on meta-analysis of RCT for testing patient-related outcomes, and a prospective cohort study for diagnostic accuracy studies. Okay, what and why do we choose? What and why do we choose a systemic review? One was to be gained by a systemic review of available evidence. So it integrates information, it reduces data to manageable levels, and again identifies the limitations of methodology, prevents proliferation of studies, enhances confidence of the results, identifies cause of inconsistency, identifies new research questions. That is the previous speaker, and some are talking about gap analysis. So if you're going any systematic review, it helps us to identify the gap, and so that we can develop a new research question. So don't go and repeat the same thing which has been done by other people. So this is what review article. Review article is a broad overview of a topic similar to a textbook chapter. So moving. Yeah, often covers multiple background aspects of a disease, such as natural history, etiology, and so on. The article also summarizes the results from primary studies. Okay, and to summarize are chosen at the discretion of the authors. Okay, review article. Next, we go into next thing. A type of review article that focuses on focused clinical question. That's called systematic review. The review articles have got variety of things, but we go for a systemic review. But when you go for a systemic review, a type of review article that focus only on certain clinical question or single clinical question, or chosen using a standardized protocol to minimize bias. Meta-analysis, a type of systematic review in which the numerical results from individual studies are mathematically combined to give a single overall estimate of the treatment effect. So what all the data you have collected in a systemic review, you do some statistical analysis and then you put it so that it's easy to interpret. Where you can get, suppose if you have a research question, so for what are the studies have been done in that research question and what are the values, everything can be brought in a single diagram. I'll tell what is mostly used for that. And where do you find those systematic reviews? In a Cochrane library, it produces high quality systemic review. And PubMed, they are accessed from clinical queries link on the blue side bar of the PubMed. Okay, go to the PubMed and go to the PubMed services. And then there is something called clinical queries, journal database, MES database, single citation, all those. There is something called clinical query. You click the clinical queries and type what is your query, then you will get all evidence-based guidelines, meta-analysis, systematic error, review, and how to critically appraise an evidence. The three concepts are essential to understand the critical appraisal of systemic review. They are publication bias and heterogeneity. Heterogeneity is a statistical measure of the difference between the results from okay, the vertical line in the middle is the line of no effect. For ratio, this is 1, and for means, it is 0. So just looking at this diagram, okay, we can see what is the question asked and what is the odds ratio by each authors, and where is your central odds ratio is there, and what is its confidence interval. All those things you can take, and you can say whether how many studies are favored the treatment and what the effect size, or how many studies are not favored to treatment. So everything, here I have shown only some 7 or 8. Like that, you can have nearly for 30, even to 400 studies in just one page or one printout. So it's easy for you to know what is it. Okay, and you can go back to where it's not favored and how they have made their study and find out what is their problem, and you can analyze the gap there. Yeah, it's like this. To average when having an average meal. It should not be like this. Okay, that is why you have to compare everything and come to a conclusion. So how to detect bias? For bias, we have a funnel plot. Consider it. Attempt to detect bias in study selection. Results of each study plotted against sample size. What do we expect? Precision in the estimation of true treatment as increased sample size increases. Small studies scatter more widely at the bottom of the graph, and in the absence of bias, the plot should resemble like a symmetrical inverted funnel. You can see here. If there is no bias, it should be symmetrical inverted funnel. Like it shows like if the study is small, your values will be scattered. Okay. And if a study involves more, sample size is more, there the values will not be scattered from each study. Okay. All the values will be concentrated in one place. If it's small, each study can give a different values. And this is how we can detect bias. To tell you all those things you can get in systematic review. So you go and select and Cochrane base and go for systematic review. All those forest plots and funnel plots will be there. You can see here. Some amount is missing at the low. Asymmetrical appearance of the funnel with a cap in the bottom corner of the graph. So what it tells? So some of the studies there where the sample size is less. Okay, the values are not there, and you can see all towards the favorable side. So sample size is small and all towards favorable side. You go and check all those results and find out what is the problem. Maybe small sample size can be the problem, or other things can be there. Misguided statistics, or lots of things you can find out there. So this shows there's a lot of bias in the studies with the small sample size. Okay, then how will you rate the evidence? You have got evidence guidelines from some other thing. So I'm not going into details, you can read later. The quality of primary studies and reviews rating are from 1A to 4. The meta-analysis systemic review are at 1A, whereas statements of committees, opinions, reviews comes under that. Again, rating of the strength of evidence supporting guidelines recommendation. Again, it's from A to D. Okay, what we have to do is we have to combine an evidence table, publication details of the individual study. Just even in journal club, we missed this. We missed what is called as the journalometrics. So we say only the title and author, but lots of things goes into it. Journalometric, there are nearly 7 or 8 parameters. Okay, study design, spectrum of patient and patient setting. What's the spectrum? Okay, we usually say it's a multiple myeloma, or we usually say it's a myocardial infarction. But what's the spectrum of patient included in it? Age-wise, blood glucose-wise, lots of things are there. The spectrum is also important. Prevalence of the condition, diagnosis with user compared, outcome measured, and the effects measured, including measure of diagnostic accuracy. common specific issues raised by the study, and quality rating and level of evidence. You look for bias. Whenever look for any study on diagnostic, look what could be the biases there. Okay, quality rating and level of evidence of the study. Okay, these are the, you've got lots of checklists. This some of the website for checklist where you'll get for everything. Okay, all types of diagnostic accuracy study. And there are lots of meta-analysis software, but it's free, like meta-analysis, Epimeta, EasyMeta, MetaTest, Meta, and commercial things are also there. Even we can do it with Stata and SAS. Okay, if you are able to use the software. That is what you can develop doing meta-analysis. It's easy to do meta-analysis only you have the data with you. You can do your own meta-analysis. And what are the promises of ELBM? It ties clinical practice to scientific standards of evidence, able to draw upon the objective experience of many researchers working with accepted scientific standards of evidence. So we can see what other scientists are working and how their results are compared to your results. It promotes uniformity, implementing cost-cutting measures, provide a scientific basis for the construction of public policies. Again, we can develop our own public policy based on evidence. Say we have a lab and you're generating your evidence. Based on the evidence, you can develop your own SOPs and public policies. And again, of course, it has got lots of critics also. Standard guidelines, disincentives for individual innovation. They say if you find establishing a guidelines based on evidence, and if you ask people to follow it, the individual innovation goes. Okay, becomes more like a cookbook medicine. Okay, like seeing a book and making cooking like that. Lower standards be de-skilling practitioners. So are we de-skilling the practitioners? I'll answer later. Instead of clinical judgment, practitioners will be encouraged to use protocols. Okay, like algorithm. Incapable of operating effectively in diverse situations. Okay. But good professionals should treat guidelines more as an option. It's a guidelines. They are not supposed to follow it. You treat like an option as true standards and professional organizations do with other types of that you have to follow. Always, but you have an option, you have a guidelines for you. Again, future. What is the future of evidence-based lab medicine? That's what I'm telling. Okay, so establish a culture for EBLM, even though many separate departments are the, you're still far behind. How? Change the pattern of journal club. You start from the residents. Okay, so evaluating a systemic review or even a meta-analysis. Even journal club can be even a part of MD evaluation. Many colleges have done that. So you make it journal club, give them a journal and ask them to split out everything in the format which has been told in evidence and ask them to calculate other things. Okay. Do we need a detailed statistical and epidemiological skills to practice EBLM? No. Then what is needed? Critical appraisal skill. Only what is needed is critical appraisal skill. Competent understanding of the strength and weakness of systemic reviews and meta-analysis. Laboratory personnel will direct more to demonstrate the impact of laboratory tests on a great variety of clinical outcomes. For this EBLM will be very much useful. And thank you for your listening. Okay. Any questions? You put it in chat box, we'll answer later.
I would like to invite Dr. Mohammed to introduce the final speaker of the day.
For the concluding session of the day, I invite Dr. Shweta Kulkarni, Professor, Department of Biochemistry at Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute, Puducherry. She has 14 years of teaching experience, completed MD Biochemistry from Vaidehi Institute of Medical Science and Research Center, Bengaluru. She secured gold medal in postgraduate diploma in good clinical laboratory practice from Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth, Puducherry, Yellow Belt in Six Sigma, and completed certificate courses on leadership and data science and artificial intelligence. She is a qualified internal auditor for clinical laboratories and a quality manager in Central Laboratory of Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute. She has published articles and case reports in national and international journals, guided MSc Medical Biochemistry students, and ICMR STS projects. She is a recognized PhD guide at Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth, Puducherry. I am pleased to invite Dr. Shweta Kulkarni. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Today's topic is role of Six Sigma in clinical chemistry. So as all of us know, the Six Sigma is one of the quality indicator. As a quality manager, we should implement a Six Sigma matrix in all the phases of a laboratory medicine. Yeah. So laboratory medicine and statistics, they go hand in hand. So no human investigation can claim to be scientific if it doesn't pass the test of mathematical proof. So in all phases of laboratory medicine, we should prove we are working at 100% level. We cannot, as a healthcare professional, we cannot compromise at 6 Sigma level. We should work beyond the 6 Sigma level. So for that, today we'll understand what is this 6 Sigma and its application to laboratory medicine. So today's talk objectives are what is 6 Sigma and what are the 6 Sigma methodologies and how this 6 Sigma we can apply in a clinical chemistry at pre-analytical, analytical and post-analytical processes. As though we know 6 Sigma is a different course. So within this 30 minutes, I will try to simplify what is this 6 Sigma and how effectively we can apply to our pre-analytical and analytical, post-analytical processes. So how good is good enough? So we claim that we are working at 99% level. We are working at 100% level. So if we are working at 99.9% level, how good we are? That 0.1% can claim 4,000 wrong medical prescription each year, more than 3,000 newborns accidentally falling from the hands of the nurses or doctors each year, or too long, too short landings at airports each day. So 400 letters per hour, which never arrive at their destination. So this 0.1% has many defects. So we should work ultimately at 6 Sigma level. So 6 Sigma is not a new terminology. It started in 1818 by Gauss. So he used the Gaussian distribution curve. From that time onwards, we have a different phases of 6 Sigma. And then finally in 1986, Bill Smith, we call him as the father of 6 Sigma, introduced the 6 Sigma terminology in the Motorola company. So later on, it was applied by the GE company in 1995. So Bill Smith, we called him as a father of 6 Sigma. He first applied this 6 Sigma terminology to the Motorola company. So what is this Sigma? It's a Greek terminology used in statistics to represent a standard deviation from a mean value. It is an indicator of degree of variation in a set of processes. So it mainly indicates a variation. So sigma measures how far a given process deviates from a perfection. So higher the sigma level, better is the performance and lower are the defects. And it is a statistical concept which measures a process in terms of defects at the sigma level. At 6 sigma level, you have only few defects, that is 3.4 defects per million opportunities. So if you see in this table, we have a 6 sigma and we have a defects per million 3.4 and we are working at 99.9% level. So our laboratory performance is ultimate. If you are working at 1 sigma level, we have a lot of defects, errors. So 6,91,462 defects per million, and we are working at a very low percentage. So ultimately, our goal is to achieve a 6 sigma level. So when you take 6 sigma as a metric parameter, so if you see this graph, it denotes a Gaussian distribution. And within this, we are accommodating the sigma level. At 6 sigma level, you are 99.99% accurate, and only you have a 0.002 defects per million. So in this, you can see here from the target, you are fixing the sigma levels. So at 6 sigma level, you have very less number of defects. So what this 6 sigma actually mean? So in this graph, you can see here, we have a tolerance specification, an upper limit and a lower limit, and you have a target. So even though you are deviating from your mean, you are fitting between the 6 standard deviation. Even though you are deviating from the mean, you are still within your upper specification limit. So you see in this graph, this is your mean and you are deviated from your mean. So we call it as a bias. Even though there is a shift of 1.5, you are still within your upper the standard deviation within the upper specification limit. So your standard deviations are fitting within your upper and lower specification limit. So if you don't chart, we still explain better in a few processes. What is this 6 standard deviation concept? The more number of standard deviation between a process average and the acceptable process limit fits, the less likely that the process performs beyond the acceptable process limits and it causes a defect. So this is the reason why a 6 sigma process performs better than the other sigma processes. So if you are operating between your upper and lower specification limits, your process is performing at a 6 sigma level. So what is the 6 sigma application in the clinical laboratory? So 6 sigma can reduce the errors in the pre-analytical, analytical and post-analytical phases of testing. You can improve the safety in the laboratory. You can reduce your turnaround times and you can improve the accuracy of your analytical tests. And you can apply this 6 sigma methodology to optimize your quality control rules. So this chart depicts the different phases of laboratory analysis. You have pre-analytical phase, analytical, post-analytical and post-analytical phase. In each phases of laboratory medicine, you can apply a 6 sigma application. So apply to any process, inherent tolerance limits, it identifies and removes the defect and it decreases the inefficiency and increases the quality in the laboratory. So here error means laboratory defects. So we have a pre-analytical, analytical and post-analytical. So we have in pre-analytical mislabeled samples as the defect, transcription errors, unsuitable samples, phlebotomy wait times, a delayed transport. In the analytical section, we have a EQUAS results outside their limit, QC failures, and valid complaint regarding the instruments, analytical cost. And in post-analytical, we have a delayed turnaround times, results delivered outside the target, critical results outside the target time, and erroneous reports. These are the most commonly laboratory errors we are seeing in our laboratory. So to these phases of lab, we can apply 6 sigma. So as the sigma level increases, defect rates decreases. Okay, so here defects are unnecessary cost, unnecessary steps, unnecessary services, the time loss, the medical errors, and which increases the patient morbidity and mortality. So how to measure this sigma metric on a scale? So at pre-analytical level, how you should measure a sigma level? So you have to inspect the outcomes and you have to count the number of defects. Okay, I will show you an example and calculate the defect per million. There are softwares available. You can calculate defects per million and corresponding sigma metric also you can calculate. And this measure outcome is useful for both pre and post analytical processes. To measure the variation for applying the analytical processes, you have to measure the bias and CV percentage. And based on this bias and CV percentage, calculate the sigma using the formula total allowable error minus bias divided by CV. And using this sigma, you can implement a right QC at 6 sigma level, what QC level I should use and what QC rule I should apply. So it is useful for analytical processes. So this is the formula to calculate your sigma metric, total allowable error minus bias divided by precision or CV percentage you can use. And you have a defects per million opportunities. We have a conversion tables, online softwares are available and you can calculate the sigma metric. So how to apply this sigma metric? There are 2 methodologies available in the laboratory. For laboratory processes, you can use the DMAC approach or DMA-DV approach. So when to use the DMAC approach and when to use the DMA-DV approach? What is this DMAC approach? Define, measure, analyze, improve and control. So this method is used to improve the current capabilities of an existing process. Already the process is there, existing process is there. How to improve its sigma level? That time you can use the DMAC approach. So this is why the most commonly used methodology of sigma improvement team. So this DMAC approach we can easily adopt in our laboratory. So this DMA-DV approach is define, measure, analyze, you have to design a process, then verify. Okay, so this method is used when you need to create or completely redesign a process. When you are going to implement a new process, or you are totally redesigning already an existing process, that time you have to apply DMA-DV approach. So let us see an example for a DMAC approach. So DMAC, define a phase. You have to define what quality improvement issues you are facing in your lab, and measure. You have to collect the data, map, measure, and assess the current process and determine a difference between the current process and the desired one. You have to do a gap analysis. Then analyze phase, search for the root cause analysis. Either you use a checklist or fishbone diagram for the root cause analysis. Then improve phase, the team changes the pilot processes and changes that seek to remove the identified root problems. After doing the root cause analysis, go for a corrective action and the preventive action. So in the control phase, you have to continue to measure the process and ensure the changes are maintained. You have to maintain that particular sigma level each year. So here we published an article on evaluation of pre-analytical quality indicators by Six Sigma and Pareto's principle. So in this, this article is published in 2018 in Indian Journal of Clinical Biochemistry. So this study was conducted in our laboratory. So we analyzed all the pre-analytical quality indicators. We set a benchmark for each quality indicators. Then we counted the defects. Those defects were converted into defects per million and corresponding sigma level was calculated. The Pareto's principle is also a quality indicator. It is also called as 80/20 rules. So as all of us know, pre-analytical quality indicators and pre-analytical errors, they constitute 60 to 80% of errors in the laboratory. So among these 80% of pre-analytical errors, the 20% of errors are most significant in your laboratory. What are these 20% errors that are prominent in your laboratory? So for that, you can plot a graph. So this is our table where we calculated defects per million and the sigma value, and we noted all the pre-analytical errors. So you can notice here, the diagnosis was missing in most of the reports or test requests. So sigma value was 0.9. So without the probable diagnosis or symptoms in the test request form, we cannot interpret the biochemical report. So this was noted to all the clinicians, and the corrective and preventive action was started. So after this study, what we have done, that is very important. So we conducted training session for the technician, the impact of intervention on Six Sigma and the Pareto's principle. So impact on what we have done, we have given a standard operating procedure to the technicians, and we have conducted the training session for the technician, and we evaluated their knowledge by giving pre-test and the post-test. So we did the analysis before training, what was their pre-analytical quality indicator percentage and what is the sigma value. After the intervention, what is the sigma value. So this is about the pre-analytical process, how we applied a sigma value. Coming to the analytical process performance, how sigma value can be interpreted, how it can be applied for a method performance, how it can be applied for a QC design. Okay, so if you see in this graph, so we have a true value, that is your average mean value, and you have a upper specification limit and a lower specification limit. This is a total allowable error. So this total allowable error you can get from your CLIA guidelines. So even though you are deviated from your mean, your true value, you are still within your upper specification limit. You can fit a 5 standard deviation or 5 sigmas within your true value and the upper specification limit. So how to design a QC process in your laboratory and how to apply a sigma value. You have to define a quality requirement at your laboratory, what quality level you want to work. and assess the method performance. And you have to prepare a operating specification chart and plot your operating point, then evaluate your rejection characteristics, then control, select the different QC rules, then adopt a QC strategy, and reassess what is the change after adopting a QC design. So defining a quality requirement. So you have to define a tolerance limit. What is your upper and lower tolerance limit? In clinical laboratory, a quality required by an analytical testing process must be defined. So how to define a quality requirement for assay at some method medical decision level? Okay. So total allowable error you can get from both total error is well adopted concept in healthcare laboratory as a model that combines both imprecision and inaccuracy. It takes into consideration both your CV percentage and the bias. Okay, so this bias we can calculate from the reference material or a reference method, or from your peer group mean, or from the all method mean, or a proficiency testing. Your EQUAS report can give you the bias percentage, or from a comparative method, or bias may be observed from your lab mean and the assayed mean and divided by the target value. So how can we find a quality requirement? So first you have to do a evaluation of the effect of analytical performance on clinical outcomes in a special clinical setting. You have to do a depth studies of the effect of changes in analytical performance upon patient population. Then you have to go for data-based components of biological variation. You have to check for how much biological variation is possible, and data based on analysis of clinician opinion. Then go for published professional recommendation from your national and international accreditation bodies. You can get a recommendation. Then you have to set a performance goal by regulatory bodies or by the EQUAS teams. Then goals based on the current state of the art as demonstrated by the EQUAS and the PT report and found in the publications also. So this total allowable error you can get from your CLIA guidelines, EQUAS, then Royal College of Pathologists of Australasia you can get, and Reliback is a German recommendation, and from RICOS guidelines you can get, or evidence-based guidelines from your own laboratory processes, or from the clinical decisions you can get a total allowable error in your laboratory. Okay, so imprecision, how to calculate in your laboratory. So there are different methods by which you can calculate the imprecision or the CV percentage. So if you want to measure a routine or historical imprecision, measure over a long term. Okay, the CLSI C24 guideline recommends 3 to 6 month routine data to measure a CV percentage. And you want to measure a intermediate precision. Okay, so it consists of 2 runs per day of a sample for 20 days you can do. The CLSI EP5 guideline specifies how to conduct this intermediate precision. So if you want to check within day or between run imprecision, 2 runs within a single day, each run consists of 10 to 20 replicates of a sample. It's very easy to do within a day or between run imprecision. And within run imprecision, this is the easiest type of study and is conducted frequently, particularly in method validation studies, and it is performed with the single run, at least 20 replicates of a sample you should do. Okay, so after knowing about this total allowable error and CV percentage, how to plot a method decision chart? There are softwares available in the Westgard website that is commonly used, or many softwares are available. So here in the x-axis, you have to plot a imprecision, that is CV percentage. In the y-axis, you have to plot a bias percentage. This chart is also called as Six Sigma bull's eye chart. Okay, so here the method which is nearer to the origin of this graph, okay, it's performing at 6 sigma level and it is called as world class quality. Okay, and you have to set a unacceptable. Are the methods which are performing below 3 sigma are unacceptable. Okay, the graph or the line which is nearer to the origin of the graph, which is performing near to the bull's eye, we call it as near to the bull's eye, is performing at 6 sigma levels. So each method you can plot in this method decision chart, and you can see at what level you are performing. This total allowable error for different parameters you get from a CLIA guideline, then you can plot. Then we have a OSPEX chart, operating specification chart for optimizing the QC design, and which QC we have to apply, which QC rule we have to plot. Okay, this OSPEX chart tools to define a method performance and QC procedure, and OSPEX chart can be used for quality requirement other than the total allowable error. So this chart also depicts the same thing. So here also in the x-axis CV percentage, and in the y-axis bias percentage, you are going to plot, and which QC rule you have to apply is given in the right side box. And PFR is the probability of false rejection. Always the probability of false rejection should be near to the 0. So this graph shows what are these lines. So here the OSPEX chart, the type of quality requirement, that is total allowable error. If you take for a parameter, we fix it at 10%. Then actual quality requirement required, and how much error you can detect here. Percent error detection, 90% you can detect the error. And this table gives, or this box gives, the different control rules. And these different colored lines indicate at which sigma level what QC rules are applied. Okay. So at 6 sigma level, the 1.35 rule is sufficient. Like if your laboratory is operating at 6 sigma level, you are going to use only one QC rule, that 13S, we call it as 13S rule. So with 13S rule, you are operating at a 6 sigma rule. If your laboratory is performing at less than 3 sigma rule, you have to apply all these QC rules like 13S, 22S, R4S, Westgard rules you have to apply. So different line correspond to the different QC rule. So if you see here, the green line, the 6 sigma where you are operating, so 13S rule is sufficient. And if you see at the blue line, you have to, your orange line, you are operating at 3, you are using the 3 QC rules to achieve a sigma level. So your QC rule will be, you are operating at a 3 sigma level. You have to use a more QC rules. Okay, so that will cost you more. So this chart also OSPEX chart. So and this describes better like how you have to apply a QC rule. The lines above and to the right of your operating point are QC procedures you can use. Okay, this is your operating point. This x-axis again is your imprecision, and y-axis is again your bias percentage you are going to apply. Okay, the lines above and right of your operating point. Okay, this is your operating point. The lines above your operating point you can use for your QC. Okay, which QC rule? So here this is pointing towards a 1.25S or 13S rule we can take. So this QC rule we can use for a 6 sigma performance. The lines below and left to the operating point are QC procedures that don't provide enough quality assurance. If you're operating below, below your operating point, your performance is below this line, you have to use more QC rules. Okay, 13S, 22S, and R4S rules. So your performance is not optimum. So Westgard gives a clear idea how many QC samples to use and how many QC rules to apply if you want to achieve a sigma value of 6. If you want to achieve a sigma of 6 or more than 6, you have to use number of QC samples 2, and you have to apply a 13S QC rule, Westgard rule. 5 sigma 2 or 3 QC samples, and you have to apply different QC rule, 1.25S or 1.3S. And if you are operating at a very less sigma, you have to use a multi-rule, different Westgard rules you have to apply. So sigma metric for process performance in clinical laboratory. So to achieve a 3 sigma, if your goal is to achieve a 3 sigma, you have not yet started a sigma application in your laboratory, and slowly you want to improve your laboratory, and your goal is to achieve just 3 sigma. So you have to just only do a obvious changes, and corrections are just obvious changes and corrections are required. If you want to use a 4 sigma, the processes must also be improved. Okay, you have to go beyond just the obvious changes. The process also should be improved. If you want to achieve a 5 sigma, you have to redesign the processes. Okay, and if you want to achieve a 6 sigma, you have to apply a rigorous tools and design for a perfection. You have to again use your aspects chart, method decision chart, which QC rule should be applied for a optimum sigma level. So that you have to use to achieve a 6 sigma. So starting from the goal is to cut the number of defects in half. Okay, don't initially aim at 6 sigma level. Slowly go from a 3 to 6. That is our aim. So what happens when sigma is more than 6? Some of the parameters we are getting more than sigma value. Okay, so sigma are essentially no different from each other. After 6 sigma, your ultimate. This high sigma metrics give you more cushion from lot to lot variation. Your method performance is perfect and lot to lot variation is very less. At extremely high sigma metrics indicate choose a tighter quality requirement, as we have seen in the method decision and aspects chart. So 1 3S QC rule is enough if we are operating at a 6 sigma level. So at 3 sigma or less than 3 sigma, what it will tell you? It will caution the clinician about the critical interpretation, like your laboratory performance is not optimum, and you have to look for references and your processes and your reagent, everything you have to do a root cause analysis. If all of your method are less than 3, it may indicate the quality requirement is not practical. You have to redesign your process. You have to apply a DMAC approach. So if your method is less than 3, use the RCV to try and compensate for poor performance. Okay. So there is no such thing as negative sigma. So there is no negative sigma value less than 3. We conclude it as a poor performance. So how this practical implementation of sigma is applied to an analytical quality. So first you have to define a quality requirement using the method decision limit, then calculate the imprecision by replication experiment, and you need a minimum of 20 sample over 20 days. Then calculate the bias of the assay method or the instrument, and you use a data from your QC result or the proficiency testing surveys. Then calculate the sigma metric. After that, you have to plot a method decision chart, which you can get from Westgard website. Then you plot a operating specification chart as a QC design tool and analyze to customize, optimize the QC design. Which QC you should use, which QC rules you should apply, you decide for your laboratory. So for analytical quality, you can use the 6 sigma for setting a QC rule, and you can choose the number of controls to estimate the cost of the quality and the design of the QC, for monitoring and evaluating the QC program, and for the improvement of your laboratory also you can use. So this table shows you how much a quality cost. If you repeat a test, how much it is costing a laboratory. So as sir was talking, the laboratory economics, so this also includes the quality cost. So if you repeat one extra glucose, so how much it will cost in terms of reagents, manpower. Okay. So these are the different Westgard rules and 6 sigma levels. So for 6 sigma, the 1 3S rule is Westgard rule is enough if you are operating 6 sigma. And if you are operating below 4 sigma, you have to apply 3 rules: 1 3S, 2 2S, and R4S rule for your laboratory. So, okay, if you are operating at less than 3 sigma, 1 3S, 2 2S, R4S, and 4 1S rules you have to apply for your QC. So this graph depicts the same thing. If you are operating at 6 sigma level, 1 3S rule is enough. And if you're operating just 3 sigma or less than 3 sigma, you have to use a different QC rules. 1,3S, R4S, 2,2S, you have to apply. So here in this aspects chart, you can see different amylase and potassium performance is displayed. Her amylase is working at a sigma level of 11. So QC rule is 1.35. So here is the operating point. The corresponding QC rule here in your table is 1.35 QC rule you can apply. But here you see the potassium. Here operating point is here. So for this you are applying all the QC rules 1,3S, 2 of 3,2S, R4S, 3,1S. Okay. So this shows your if you are operating at less sigma level, more QC rule, more QC sample is utilized and reagent is utilized, which is costing your laboratory. So how different is 6 sigma from the quality assurance? Okay, so mainly 6 sigma approaches towards the customer satisfaction. Okay, quality assurance is for your internal laboratory. You are going to review your own performance. Quality assurance more looks at the averages. The 6 sigma targets the variation. Okay, how far you are deviating from your mean, how far your process is deviating from the target. And quality assurance mainly focuses on the outcomes. Sigma focuses on the process, the whole process, the sigma is applicable. The quality assurance is retrospective. Once the QC is analyzed, you are going retrospectively, you view the which QC rule is violated, then you do the root cause analysis, then you will do the corrective preventive action. But sigma is prospective. So each level you can identify and you can prevent the defects. Quality assurance more focuses on the obviously quality. The sigma are focus both on the quality and the investment you are doing in the laboratory. So mainly quality assurance is attentive to production, and this 6 sigma is totally applicable to your whole business, like whole laboratory. You can apply the 6 sigma. Here in quality assurance, the training is separate from the management system. Here 6 sigma training is integral to management system. Here all levels of staff you can train to achieve a 6 sigma, starting from your inventory, HR, everything includes in the 6 sigma. So to conclude, the high quality methods are triple win, easier for labs to operate, cheaper for health system to finance, better for patients and the clinician. So 6 sigma will help the laboratory to choose the right QC design for each of the parameter, and implement the right QC design will cost effective. And 6 sigma metric method decision chart, aspects chart provider easy tool for laboratories to determine the performance of their current method, validation protocols of a new instrument, method and a reagent you can do. You can compare the instrument, method and the reagent performance with 6 sigma, and you can plan the QC design also. So advantages of using 6 sigma at all levels. So it minimizes the wait times for the patients, minimizes the discomfort, minimizes the cost. It helps in rapid diagnosis and treatment. For healthcare staff, the TAT will be within time. Okay, so if you apply a 6 sigma, and you can give a reliable results to your customers. And relevant information like critical alert will be informed within the 30 minutes time. So it reaches within a turnaround time. So for laboratory staff, what is the advantage of implementing a 6 sigma? So it gives a clear expectation. They know what to do, what QC sample, how many times, which rule is violated, what to do for that. So it minimizes the time wastage. And everyone, if your sigma level is high, you will get respect and appreciation from the management and from your director. Okay, and you can manage the workload if you know clearly what to do in your lab. So thank you all for your patience listening. And I would like to thank Department of Biochemistry, Jipmer, for giving me the opportunity. So any queries are there, you can ask me. So 6 sigma is actually a different course. There are yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and master black belt are there. So each will teach you a different level of sigma. So you can do a course in 6 sigma also.
Thank you, ma'am, for anything with Jipmer method. Now we are nearing the end of our CME. Every story has an end, but in life, every ending has a new beginning. For this course, I would like to invite Dr. Ramesh, Department of Biochemistry, Organizing Secretary of our CME.
Okay, I am here to give the vote of thanks. First of all, I have to thank the director of Jipmer, the AMBI, and my HOD for giving me permission to conducting this CMA and also for their constant support. Next, I have to thank all the speakers here, starting from Dr. Jayachandran, Sabanan, Vinodari, Dr. Sweta, and Angel, who presented such a wonderful topic in a nice way. Then finally, I have to thank my small battalions here who stood with this for the past 1 month in arranging all the things necessary in organizing and did it in a very good way till the vote of thanks. Next, I have to thank the IT department for their support and also all other faculties from my department and all other orderlies and attendants from our department. Finally, not the least, I would thank all the participants who are there from morning 9 to approximately 1 o'clock and patiently listen to all the section. Hope, I think we instill some ideas into you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you all. Thank you, sir. Education is not learning of facts, but training of the mind to think. Thank you all for your active participation. We are winding up the session. Feedback form will be shared in the chat box. Please, all of you, give your valuable feedbacks.